members and officers to this meeting of Cabinet, which, due to government advice to the public to practice social distancing, will once again be held virtually. The meeting is being recorded and will be available via the Council's website to be viewed as soon as possible following the meeting. Everyone participating in the meeting will be accessing this meeting from remote locations. Please, could everybody ensure that mobile phones are switched off or to silent mode? Members will have received an electronic copy of the agenda on Wednesday the 9th of September. I will ask officers to present a summary of the key points on each of the reports that comprise the agenda. For the record, the agenda can be viewed on the Council's website. Members and officers will be speaking at various points during the meeting, and those speaking may switch their cameras on at that point, but I would ask that, with the exception of myself as chairperson, at all other times you keep your cameras and microphones switched off, as this will help to minimise any background noise and interference, and to ensure that the connection remains as stable as possible. If any Cabinet members or officers wish to raise a point or question, they should use the instant messaging icon in the bottom left Skype window and simply type speak. I'll come to you in the order I receive requests. Please do not use your microphone until I invite you to do so. In the event that the committee requires to vote on any item of business before it at the meeting, I will announce that the members of the committee have 20 seconds to vote by typing for, against or abstain in the instant messaging icon. I will then ask the legal officer to announce the decision made by the committee. Officers from Democratic Services will be supporting the meeting and will be monitoring the use of microphones throughout the meeting, and when necessary will mute those not being used. Before we formally commence, I will now ask the officer from Democratic Services to announce the names of the councillors in attendance at this meeting. Also ask the officers to introduce themselves as and when I invite them to speak during the course of the meeting. Officers too should ensure. Sorry, did someone come in then?
Sorry, Chair, it was me. Mark Alvin.
Apologies, Mark. Did you want to come in?
I just want to announce the members present today, Chair.
Okay, please go ahead then, Mark.
Thanks, Chair. Members present today are yourself, Councillor Hugh David as leader, Councillor Howell Williams as deputy leader, Councillor Denisha Patel, Cabinet Member Wellbeing and Future Generations, Councillor Charles Smith, Cabinet Member Education and Regeneration, Councillor Richard Young, Cabinet Member Communities, and Councillor Philip White, Cabinet Member Social Services and Early Help. For the benefit of the recording, I'm Mark Alvin. I'm the Senior Democratic Services Officer Committees, and I'll be taking the minutes of the meeting today. And Mike Pittman will be manoeuvring around the electronics to ensure all is well there.
Okay, thank you for that, Mark. We'll now go through the agenda that has been shared with all members. So first of all, we will receive apologies for absence, and as we have heard, all members are present, though I'll just check whether Councillor Young has been able to join us, because I know he had a matter that he had to urgently attend to. Can I just check, Mark, whether Councillor Young is here?
Just checking now, Leader, because there's quite a lot of participants today.
There is.
And I beg your pardon for my earlier announcement. Councillor Young does not appear to be here.
I know he had an urgent medical appointment that he needed to attend, so please accept his apologies. If he is able to return and take part in the meeting later on, then he will do so. I'll now move on to declarations of interest. So if any member or officer has an interest to declare in any matter on the agenda, please type speak into the meeting chat. We'll come to you in turn for you to announce your declaration of interest. Councillor Patel, please.
Thank you, Leader. I would like to declare an interest in item 16 and item 17. I'm named in item 16 and my cabinet portfolio is named in item 17.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Patel. And just for the record, it is personal interest you are declaring on both items?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Patel. And of course, there will be a form that you will, as all members, have to complete when there are any declarations of interest. Deputy Leader, please.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Yeah, it's just occurred to me actually, and I should have probably declared interest at the last cabinet. I do have grandchildren in receipt of learner travel to the Welsh School in Bedws. So that's a personal interest.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Leader. Are there any other declarations of interest? If not, then we will now move on to the minutes of the last two meetings of Cabinet, held on the 30th of June and the 21st of July. Can I have a mover and seconder for the minutes, please?
Happy to move the minutes.
Thank you, Councillor Patel.
Sorry, I was on mute.
And they've been seconded by Councillor White. All agreed? Thank you.
Yes.
We will now receive our first report today, first of many reports today, and I will ask the Chief Officer, Legal, HR and Regulatory Services to introduce colleagues from our Shared Regulatory Service to present the report. Kelly, please.
Thank you, Leader. As you've said, we have got colleagues from the Shared Regulatory Services with us today. They'll take you through the report. So we have Helen Picton and Craig Lewis, and they'll be able to explain much better than myself the detail of the work they've undertaken during this past year. So I'll hand you straight over to Helen and Craig.
Okay, and a very warm welcome to Helen and to Craig. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader, and good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, perfectly. Thank you, Helen.
Okay, so the purpose of this report is twofold. Firstly, it seeks Cabinet approval for the 2020 Annual Air Quality Progress Report for Bridgend County Borough, which is attached for Cabinet as Appendix 1. Secondly, the report provides an update on the creation of a draft air quality action plan for the Park Street Air Quality Management Area, and it seeks endorsement for further work to be carried out in this regard. So I'm going to take you through a little bit of the background in section 3 to the report, before I pass to Craig, who will be able to discuss the detail. So just to set the context again, as we do when we present these reports, under the Environment Act of 1995, every local authority has an obligation to regularly review and assess air quality in their areas and to determine whether or not air quality objectives to protect health are likely to be achieved. Where the air quality reviews indicate that the air quality objectives are not being achieved or are not likely to be achieved, then under the Act, local authorities are required to designate an air quality management area, or AQMA, and that obviously is what has been designated since the 1st of January of last year on Park Street. So Welsh Government requires that local authorities produce an annual progress report in draft by the 30th of September each year and publish it by the 31st of December at the latest. That report must include monitoring results for the previous calendar year, a progress report on action plan implementation, and an update on any new policies or developments likely to affect air quality. So for clarity, what we're looking at is the 2020 annual progress report. However, it is considering looking at in detail the results gathered from air quality monitoring during 2019. And just so that we're absolutely clear, we've seen a lot in the press of late about the impact of lockdown and less people being on the roads on air quality. This data set, which Craig will talk you through shortly, is not affected by that because it is purely contained in 2019, prior, of course, to any lockdown. So I'm going to pass you now to Craig so that he's able to talk you through the detail.
Okay, thank you, Helen.
Okay.
Craig, please.
Fantastic. Okay, thanks for that, Helen. Leader, thank you for today. So point 4, which is the current situation and proposal. Obviously, we have the Park Street Bridgend AQMA order, which was officially implemented on the 1st of January 2019. Then if you go to figure 1, there we can see the extent of the order and the geographical area that covers. So as Helen's quite rightly suggested, that the 2020 annual progress report focused on 2019 data sets. So the 2020 annual progress report outlines the revisions made to the NO2 non-automatic monitoring network utilising Bridgend for 2019. Existing non-automatic NO2 monitoring locations were decommissioned due to continued compliance, and new NO2 monitoring locations were commissioned to strengthen understanding in existing monitored areas such as Park Street, AQMA and Cowbridge Road. So this 2020 annual progress report, which is great to see, confirms that in 2019, in general, air quality within Bridgend County continues to meet the relevant air quality objectives as prescribed in the Air Quality Regulations 2000 and the Air Quality Regulations 2002. So this 2020 annual progress report does confirm that in 2019, air quality continues to be a prevalent concern along Park Street, coinciding with the geographical boundary of the Park Street Bridgend AQMA order, which is obviously, that's on point to what we believe to be from when we first implemented the order. It is also noted that elevated annual average air quality levels exist in close proximity to Park Street, along adjoining road networks where relevant exposure is apparent, so Tondy Road, etc. So figure 2 depicts that in terms of where the additional monitoring station will be. If you look at figure 2, summarised and titled as 2019's NO2 diffusion tube monitoring locations, you have OBC 108 and OBC 107. We'll go on to that now in terms of the levels. So 4.5, it is noted that monitoring undertaken at monitoring sites OBC 110 and OBC 123, which are within the Park Street AQMA, located on Park Street residential facades, does not only demonstrate annual average levels in exceedance of the annual average air quality objective, which is set at 40, but so the 1 hour objective is described as 200 micrograms not to be exceeded more than 18 times per year. But by the monitoring methods that we use, which is the non-automated monitoring methods for Park Street in terms of the diffusion tube data, we are looking at a annual average figure of 60, which therefore depicts if it's greater than 60, we can therefore assume that that 200 micrograms per meter cubed is being exceeded in terms of the short-term objective. So looking at those two particular points, OBC 110 and 123, we have annual average figures for those sites at 53.7 and 55.2. And as I said, we want to focus on a level of 60. So they're not in breach, but they're extremely close to. So that's a matter of concern to the action plan for Park Street. So focusing upon those monitoring sites, which I've just mentioned earlier, outside the AQMA boundary, but located in close proximity on pieces of adjoining road network, site OBC 108 demonstrates elevated annual average levels of 36.2. Again, not quite at the 40, which is the annual average limit value, but again, anything above 35, we want to be viewing that with a level of caution. So it is essential that highlighted monitoring sites are closely examined. So as I said, the OBC 108 and suitable action is taken where necessary, such as action which may involve the amendment to the Park Street AQMA order, expanding the geographical boundary to that to encapsulate a wider boundary and reasoning for the declaration. So when I say reason for declaration, we may need to amend the Park Street order not to only suggest the reason for that order being raised for the annual average objective, but also for the short term. But as it stands, we aren't in breach of that just yet, so I would just keep it as it is in terms of the why it's been raised in terms of the annual average objective being breached for NO2. So in addition to the non-automated monitoring network specific to Park Street, it is imperative that the shared service and BCBC improve the air quality monitoring capabilities along Park Street by introducing an automated monitoring system. Now, we did mention this last year. Obviously, we have had a few implications which have hindered us for this year, but this equipment would allow for air quality trends to be examined on a high temporal resolution basis, as in 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and therefore be able to assist with underpinning those short-term periods whereby raised levels of NO2 are particularly prevalent. So that's quite important. And in terms of an update for that site, we have had planning permission. We've also come to a legal agreement whereby we've met with representatives of the Quaker Meeting House, which is the proposed site of the new AMS, automated monitoring station. However, as I've mentioned, COVID-19 has had an impact somewhat, hindering the progression in formalising the agreement. But at the time of writing this report, it has been agreed to reconvene the formalisation agreement and verify some details about the site's implementation. So that is all a work in progress, which I'm currently working on right now. So hopefully we should have a good understanding for where we stand with the implementation of that site. So the next section, which is 4.10 onwards, we talk about the Park Street AQMA Action Plan update. So as we know, the LAQM statutory duties from the date of raising the AQMA order, which was the 1st of January, SRS and BCBC has 18 months in which to prepare a draft action plan to improve air quality in the area, and once agreed, this must be formally adopted before 2 years has elapsed. So we're currently working in accordance with Welsh Government's policy guidance to produce such an action plan to support the Park Street AQMA. So in order to develop these ideas and ensure an effective action plan which considers all aspects, prioritising public health, an air quality action plans work steering group has been put together, which consists of representatives from very cross departments in BCBC, as well as other partner agencies such as Public Health Wales. So in addition to the works and discussions held by the work steering group assigned for the action plan production, a number of informal drop-in sessions have also been facilitated by SRS and BCBC, which took place in December 2019, which provided opportunities for the public to find out more about the air quality in the area, and also any updates and suggested ideas for the draft air quality action plan. So just to bring you back, and I just double checking if it's been mentioned earlier on, we have had an extension to the draft action plan submission date, obviously based on the COVID. I think there is a COVID-19 section that comes up, but sorry if this is repeated that, but just to re-clarify, we obviously did have 18 months to establish and submit the action plan for the Park Street AQMA. However, obviously due to the implications of COVID and how that's affected our working, our ways of working, we therefore have we've been given granted permission formally by Welsh Government to extend that for another 6 months. So we actually have now until the end of this year to submit the draft action plan. So 4.13, so coming back to the work steering group and those drop-in sessions that took place in December 2019, collaborating the ideas and suggestions made, a list of proposed mitigation options has been put together. So we've had a large list of mitigations measures put together within a table, and at this stage of development and action plan, all mitigation measures are considered, which provides a degree of transparency to allow interested persons to view all options considered. So following that proposed list of mitigation measures being put together, I performed an indicative cost and benefit score, so it's called an cost benefit analysis for each action. Now the potential actions have been scored for cost benefit and the resulting rank in order to identify the most deliverable actions. So following that, as agreed by the work steering group and coincided with the feedback received at the December 2019 public engagement sessions, the extent of the air quality levels examined on Park Street are derived by the... So what we found is that, the extent of the air quality levels examined on Park Street are derived by the nature of traffic flows utilising the network. So as we said here in paragraph 4.15, queuing and inconsistent traffic flows would appear to be the principal cause of the portrayed poor air quality levels. I think we can agree that. So following the indicative cost-benefit analysis, a decision was therefore made by the work steering group to pursue those mitigation options that would manage and improve transport flows through the Park Street AQMA, and in doing so deliver air quality improvements in the shortest possible time and in line with the ambitions of Welsh Government and BCBC, which states to reduce levels to as low as reasonably practicable. So therefore, 4.17, it is recommended that in order to proceed with the development of a successful and meaningful air quality action plan, the Council will need to make the decision whether to undertake detailed transport and air quality assessments to quantify and ensure that correct mitigation measures are implemented. So what we're saying here is you can develop a list for mitigation options to support the action plan. However, we're trying to make that decision to go one step further and actually sanction works to be undertaken to look at those measures in more detail, to therefore come to the more informed decision that these are the correct options to pursue. So with this viewpoint, BCBC SRS has taken the informed decision to agree and pursue the necessary works to examine the impact expected of a preferred mitigation option package. So we will be looking at a preferred options package which includes denial all access onto St Leonard's Road, which is earmarked as Measure 18 in the table, which is also included in the annual progress report, which is as part of the appendices, just to note. Number 2, we'll implement a 4-phase junction, free traffic, one pedestrianisation at the Hill and Nant turn-in, Measure 21, and we'll also optimise the Park Street, Angel Street, Tondy Road junction, which is Measure 20. So it's proposed that SRS and BCBC will seek external consultant support to undertake the transport and air quality modelling for the above options, or the options just mentioned, to illustrate any benefits for air quality levels. As the above measures work in conjunction with one another, transport and air quality modelling undertaken will assess the options cumulatively as one preferred scenario. So as I say, we aren't just looking at these individually, we're looking at it as a package, as we say, because they complement each other in one swift movement. So works are now underway to progress with the assessments, working with external consultants to ensure a suitable scope of works is provided. So that's where I'm at right now. And as mentioned earlier, we've got a little section in here about COVID-19 impacts. Now 4.19, so due to the unprecedented circumstances, this had an impact on local air quality monitoring and the development of the action plan for the Park Street AQMA in terms of its schedule and delivery. So Welsh Government have been made aware of the delays to delivering the action plan. In doing so, Welsh Government recognised the need to allow for an extension period to facilitate the draft of the draft action plan, and submission of that draft action plan is being confirmed that a 6-month extension for the draft action plan has been accepted by Welsh Government's Minister. So therefore the deadline for the submission is now set as the 31st of December 2020. So despite the difficulties, SRS do see the completion of the action plan as a necessity and are committed to producing the draft action plan. So another point to raise here, which is important, during the COVID-19 pandemic, local air quality monitoring has continued in Bridgend. However, some non-automated results for a few selected months in 2020 will not be available for next year's reporting due to lockdown measures introduced in the month of March 2020, such as we were looking at delays with the laboratories in terms of the analytical turnover times, also it was all very new to how staff members need to minimise their time out and about sampling. So at that point, we just had to prioritise certain areas, and in doing so, obviously, areas have gone amiss for some early months, such as March, April and May. So local authorities, including SRS at the time of the lockdown measures being imposed, looked for official clarity to ascertain if the monitoring was classified as an essential service in view of the quieted road networks, which may lead to a favourable bias, as well as difficulties faced by analytical laboratories utilised by SRS, which had to adapt their working practices, which added to postage delays. So that just reiterates the points I just made. So air quality data collection has been deemed as moving on, so air quality data collection has been deemed as an essential service by Welsh Government, whereby monitoring was resumed for May 2020. So the results for 2020, which will be recorded in the 2021 annual progress report, will need to be corrected, ratified to account for those gaps in the annual data sets incurred by the COVID situation. The exclusion of this data will be further discussed. However, at this moment in time, results gathered during the COVID pandemic, where it is apparent that road traffic volumes have decreased significantly, are perhaps not representative of a true business as usual scenario, which could generate a bias underestimate of results. So I just want to really bring home that point there, that we are aware of that, and we are taking that on board in terms of our monitoring needs and reporting. Next then, this is just to highlight Welsh Government's Clean Air Plan for Wales, Healthy Air Cymru, so their new publication that's come about, which underpins its commitment and long-term ambition to improve air quality in Wales. There's a link there in paragraph 4.23, so please feel free to have a look at that when you have a chance. And ultimately, SRS and BCBC do support the aspirations of the plan and welcome the development of a more stringent mitigation measures that will enable a cohesive approach to air quality management and protecting public health and the natural environment. We then have sections 5. The report does not have any impacts on policy framework or procedure rules. Quality impact assessment, section 6, there are no equality implications arising from this report. Section 7, Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, yes, we adopt the principles as SRS and BCBC. And then section 7.2, it looks at the objectives of the WFG, and I don't really need to go into too much detail of that. What I'll do now is I'll hand over to Helen to talk about the finances.
Okay, thanks so much for that comprehensive report, Craig. Helen, please.
Thank you, Leader. Just to take you through section 8 of the report, the financial implications. So three elements here. Firstly, of course, SRS has the existing budget to complete our annual programme of air quality monitoring across Bridgend County Borough. However, the two additional points in 8.2 and 8.3 for Cabinet, to support the development of the Park Street AQMA, we're looking at the detailed transport and air quality modelling that Craig has spoken about, and there will be a cost associated with that, and that cost has been agreed and will be funded from corporate contingency. Likewise, with regard to the siting of the automated air quality monitoring station on Park Street, that cost has also been agreed and will be funded from a corporate contingency. So just moving on then to recommendations. So today Cabinet is asked to note and accept the results of air quality monitoring gathered in 2019 for Bridgend County Borough. 9.2, to note the progress made in developing the air quality action plan for the Park Street AQMA and endorse the decision to proceed with detailed transportation and air quality assessments to help quantify the impact the favoured measures could have on air quality within the Park Street AQMA. And 9.3, to agree the finalisation of the 2020 annual progress report, which Craig has talked us through, for submission as the final version to Welsh Government before the 30th of September 2020. And that takes us through the report, and obviously we're happy to answer any questions.
Yes, thank you, Helen. A comprehensive report, and thank you both very much for the work you've done on this. I'll ask the Cabinet member to come in now. Councillor Patel, please.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Helen and Craig, for the report. I can see there's a lot of hard work gone into it. I remember the drop-in sessions we held in December in the Halo. They seem so long ago. But yeah, thank you both for the information. And I'd also like to thank Councillor White for ringing me about this for updates, and also Councillor Webster and Councillor White for attending the briefing session that we held with them. So it's important for us to know what the local members think, and so yeah, just thanks to them for keeping this on the radar as well. I'd like to just highlight that this is a report based on the 2019 data, and it supports what we found in 2018, that there is a need for an area management order, and as you pointed out in the report, this is due to queuing and inconsistent traffic flows. So for me, what's really important in this report is that the measures that were put forward, they've all been co-produced with the public and cross departments. And I think the objective is clear. We want to get the nitrogen dioxide levels down as low as possible, as soon as possible. Your cost benefit analysis, which is in the report as well, I think clearly highlights the kind of the cumulative impact, and we're trying to hit the problem at source. And like you said as well, it is an evolving document, so we will be monitoring this closely to see what comes of it. And there's a raft of measures that we haven't implemented yet, so we will be able to work our way through the list if we need to. If we don't, then great. If we do, then that piece of work's already there. I'd like to thank the public as well for engaging with us, and the world is changing. More people are working from home, so we may see a natural reduction in traffic. And yeah, so I'd just like to leave it at that and move the recommendations in the report, please, Leader.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Patel. Are there any questions or comments from Cabinet members, please? I know that we did receive representations around the possibility of a bypass to address some of the traffic problems and the resultant air quality issues that the congestion and the queuing causes. I know, Craig, that you and colleagues prepared a very long list of different options. I'm not sure if that was one of the options, but obviously that there would be a significant resource implication to that type of measure, and also the current strategy, policy and planning framework that we have in place does not support the creation of more roads and bypasses as a solution, because there is a school of thought that is driving current transport policy that you simply displace the problem, or you generate more traffic, and if you generate more traffic, then you generate more air pollution. Did you want to respond to that, Craig, please?
If I could come in that one, Leader, as well.
Yes, certainly, Councillor Smith.
Do you want me to go before Craig or afterwards? I don't mind either way.
I'll bring Craig in first, and possibly Zach, if Zach is here with us, because they're obviously transport.
I'm thinking just specifically of the proposal for a bypass which came in from a member of the public.
Yes. So I'll bring Craig in, then you can come in then, Councillor Smith. Craig, please.
Yep, no, that's fine. Yeah, no, I have seen sight of the proposal, and as we say, it is an evolving document, so nothing is off the list in terms of proposed mitigation options. So certainly, yes, in terms of the evolving document, that's something that can be taken into consideration. However, what I will stress is that we did hold the cross-department, we did have cross-department agreement. We also had those drop-in sessions, and whereby we looked at the most viable and most achievable options, given what we were currently working with in terms of the inconsistent and queuing traffic flows. The measures that have been put forward in terms of those 3 measures for the preferred options felt like to be the most achievable and the most viable options given our current circumstances. And therefore it's felt that is best to pursue those options currently with the detailed transportation and air quality assessments.
Okay, thank you, Craig. That's an important point around achievability and timescales as well, and that will be an important factor or factors that we need to weigh up when we're considering options. Zach, please.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Yes, just to reiterate what others have said, certainly the options presented are the ones, that have been arrived at following some detailed consideration. I also think with regard to the suggestion, of a bypass road, apart from the obvious resource and impacts of creating that roadway, there are a lot of other solutions and steps along the way that I think would probably be warranted more highly, before you get to the stage where you start thinking we need to dilute the traffic by creating a new road. Certainly as we move forward, things like the ultra low emissions vehicles, that's high on, government agenda, the issues around idling and you see in vehicles that are changing to automatically cut out when they're stopping in traffic. Now, all of these steps and actions are ones that will hopefully change how vehicles work and how they affect the highway going forward, that would have a positive impact before we get to the stage where we need to start thinking about additional roads. And also, of course, the changing of behaviours, the integrated network map, the active travel routes that are constantly expanding around Bridgend, will hopefully change behaviours to more sustainable transport methods and move people away from the cars rather than just creating additional roadway for additional cars and additional traffic and additional pollution. So yes, I think certainly it's I can understand the logic of an additional roadway would dilute and disperse and potentially have a reduction effect, but it would be an extremely heavy resource intensive measure, and one that wouldn't necessarily have a long-term benefit in the way that changing behaviours and technology potentially will.
Okay, thank you for that helpful explanation, Zach. Councillor Smith, please.
Thank you, Leader. I think it's important to respond specifically to that idea of a bypass. It comes in from a member of the public who I regard as very well qualified and knowledgeable member of the public, and also jointly from one of our members who I'm sure we all regard as well qualified and knowledgeable councillor. So in effect, if I understand it correctly, it's a bypass that would avoid traffic needing to go via the traffic lights at the foot of Park Street. So in effect, traffic would go directly from Tondy Road, a point in Tondy Road, to Cefn Road. There are practical problems with that. The finance that Zach has mentioned is obviously number one. The second thing would be land ownership. The third thing would be the actual fact that a route might not be available because of building development that's happened. I think there is a long-standing need for safe access from Penivy to Cefn. The road is at least medieval, possibly prehistoric. but it was built really to link Newcastle Church with Penny Church. So it goes straight up Newcastle Hill and then down Kevin-Glass Hill. As it goes down from Kevin-Glass to Penny, it's extremely dangerous. Walkers or cyclists would be very badly advised to use that road. I have seen cyclists using it. There is a public footpath that starts halfway down that road, and then so to get to it you've got to walk on a very dangerous road, and then to get to Penny you've got to cross a main railway line where trains can come at 90 miles an hour around the bend. So really I think that the idea of this road bypass is a non-starter. And anyway, it wouldn't make logical sense. You're delivering more cars to the Kevin-Glass area, and so increasing, shifting a pollution problem from one area to the next. What I think is worth looking at long term, and I think it's difficult, but it's really worth looking at, is the possibility of a cycling walking route between Penny and Kevin-Glass. I know Councillor Altaf Hussain would be very keen on this. There are all sorts of practical difficulties with that, but not as great as the difficulties with an actual road. But I think that ought to be an ambition, really, is to get some means of cyclists and walkers getting safely between Penny and Kevin-Glass. Thank you, Leader.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Smith. I think that illuminates that suggestion, highlights the importance of the next step, which is the air quality and transport modelling, Craig, because that will identify or help identify the options which are most effective, and that's a vital next step for us, and that's something that is being proposed and has been moved today by Councillor Patel. Yep. So, yeah. So, are members all in agreement with that proposal? And as Craig has explained, this is a process. It's an evolutionary process, but I hope it'll be a quick evolutionary process. So once we know the outcome of that modelling, then we can consider a range of different options, and I'm hopeful that we can progress those options. I think we're being very forward-thinking in Bridgend by trying to address the problem before we breach statutory limits, and we will identify solutions that will work, and if they don't work, we will identify alternative actions that can address this, because we do have a duty that we are determined to meet to improve air quality in this area, and that's what today's report is proposing. So are all Cabinet members in agreement with that? Yes? Okay. Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much, Helen and Craig. You are, of course, very welcome to stay, but I would completely understand if you've got, I know you're both very busy, particularly with the work that SRS is undertaking at the moment in terms of the response to the pandemic, and it has been nothing short of heroic, actually, the work that's been undertaken. So please do convey our appreciation and our thanks back to everyone in the service, because I know how incredibly busy you are at the moment, and I certainly find you incredibly responsive, and it is a reflection of the professionalism and commitment that that you as a service is showing to protecting the public. So thank you both once again.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We're a bit busy, so we will leave now if that's okay. But thank you for the invite.
Okay, see you again soon.
Bye bye.
Thank you both.
Bye.
Okay, so next report that we've got is a report of the cross-party recovery panel and their phase 1 findings and recommendations. And I believe that we have been joined. I know he's here. I heard him earlier by the chairperson of the panel. I think we've also been joined by the chairperson of the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee as well. I've seen that both Councillor Burnett and Councillor Green are here. And I am going to invite Councillor Green to present the report. Councillor Green, please.
Thank you for that, Leader. Yes, I'm presenting this as the chair of the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee, but Councillor Baldwin has very kindly come along, and if he could answer any questions, etc., as he chaired the panel. Right. The purpose of this report is to present the Cabinet with the Phase 1 findings and recommendations of the Cross-Party Recovery Panel, which are attached at Appendix A, which is a 12-page document. And we wish to note that the work of the Cross-Party Recovery Panel will continue with regular reviews of the work to help ensure effectiveness and respond to any emerging issues. The connection to corporate and wellbeing objectives under the Wellbeing of Future Generations Wales Act 2015 is supporting a successful, sustainable economy, helping people and communities to be more healthy and resilient, smarter use of resources. Right, the committee acknowledged that the council went through significant change during the period since March the 23rd, and that some services have been created, some have stopped, staff have been redeployed. And it was agreed on the 13th of July at the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee to establish a cross-party recovery panel. Membership of this was the existing Corporate Overview Committee and 4 additional members, 2 Labour, 1 Independent Alliance, 1 Conservative. They were nominated by the group leaders. So the aim of the panel was to actually help to shape, inform and advise the Cabinet on the Council's recovery planning, to form the basis of a recovery phase for COVID-19 pandemic. It met on 6 occasions in August, and we were supported by the Senior Democratic Officer on Scrutiny, 2 Scrutiny Officers, Group Manager, Legal and Democratic Service. During the meetings, the Cross-Party Recovery Panel considered presentations from requested invitees, including PSB officers, BAVO, etc., and also the head of Partnership Services, Martin Morgans, and the Group Manager for Housing. The Cross-Party Recovery Panel has taken a structured approach to the selection of key areas for prioritising to feed into the recovery process and has identified key issues following examinations. On the 7th of September, the Corporate Scrutiny Committee received the findings from the chair of the Cross-Party Recovery Panel, and it was approved that the recommendations should be forwarded to yourselves as Cabinet. We were also considering the next steps proposed and consider whether we wish to work beyond September, and it was acknowledged that the recovery following the pandemic is significant and very, very complex, and that the panel would have a key role to play in this. So basing on that, there are 16 recommendations within the Appendix A. I won't go through every one now. I see one of the recommendations is actually addressed in the agenda today, I believe at item 8. But what we are requesting Cabinet to do is A, to consider the findings and recommendations of the Recovery Panel at Appendix A, and B, to note the work of the cross-party recovery panel will continue, and further recommendations as they appear will be reported to the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee and then subsequently to Cabinet. I'm happy if there's any particular questions, and I'm sure that if I cannot answer, Councillor Baldwin would be happy to help out as he chaired each one of these meetings. Thank you very much, Leader.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Councillor Green and Councillor Baldwin, and all the members that have been involved in the panel. I can see how very busy you've been, and you've made a number of recommendations, important recommendations that we will certainly consider very carefully. And I'll ask the Chief Executive to come in here. I know we've certainly started to consider those recommendations, but there are 16, and we want to give them all the time and the focus that you'd expect us to. So, Mark, I'll bring the Chief Executive in now, please.
Thank you, Leader. Just to reiterate what you said, and to thank the panel for all the hard work that they've undertaken in a relatively short period of time. I think, as you'd expect, we need to reflect really on the detail of some of the recommendations, and certainly from my point of view, and I think from your point of view, a lot of them seem eminently sensible and things that we'd want to incorporate into our revision of the corporate plan and our refocus of the medium-term financial strategy, be that now or indeed for next year, because clearly some of them are more imminent than others. So what I think we will do is reflect on them, discuss them in some detail as necessary, and then revert back to the panel as soon as we can with the views on each of the recommendations. But clearly it's a really important and really good piece of work, and one that will help us enormously in terms of shaping our COVID recovery plan. So I think that's probably the best way forward, Leader, rather than going through them one by one today, which would inevitably take a fair bit of time. And I also know that Councillor Baldwin and the panel also have a fair amount of background information should we wish to retrieve that in any way to understand the rationale for some of them. So I think that's probably the best way forward, Leader.
Yes, thank you for that, Mark. And just as an example, on page 147, recommendation 6 of 16 is around the plans that Cwmtaf Morgannwg University Health Board have for primary and secondary healthcare. So that's a recommendation that was already in train. A very important a point that the panel raises there, and it's a recommendation we were looking at and will progress anyway. So it does not require formal acceptance of recommendations by the Cabinet before some of the very important proposals and recommendations that have been made by the panel are adopted. So I wanted to give that assurance that where recommendations are time sensitive, they are being considered now and will be progressed as soon as possible, and that is a principle we will apply to the future work of the panel so that the timetabling of formal cabinet committees will not slow the implementation of any helpful and useful recommendations that are made by the panel, because we have found the work of the panel, and you've been very, very busy, helpful to the decisions of Cabinet. Okay, So the recommendations are there, Cabinet members. Are you content that we consider the findings and recommendations of the panel to feed into the medium-term financial strategy and corporate plan, and also that we will receive further recommendations from the panel through the Overview and Scrutiny Committee as their work progresses?
Move.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. And thank you, Councillor Green and Councillor Baldwin. If you don't mind, I'm sure we'll want to see you back here in Cabinet, and I'm sure we will want to draw on your experience and the recommendations and ask questions in the future. So we look forward to seeing you back here again. And as I said, if need be, we could have a session in between Cabinet meetings to progress any recommendations that are urgent. Okay, thank you both, and we will now receive a report on the Puthcall Waterfront Regeneration Scheme, Salt Lake and Sandy Bay sites, and this is a report of the Head of Operations Community Services, and I will ask Zach to take us through the report, please.
Thank you, Leader. So the report members will find as agenda item 6. The purpose of the report is to bring 3 areas of consideration to members' attention in relation to the Porthcawl Regeneration Scheme. 2 of those areas are for noting an update, and one of those areas that I'll take us through is for further consideration, determination, and hopefully approval on the proposed way forward. The first of the areas that we'll consider is in regard to the local development plan updates and the proposed land use framework for the regeneration area proposed in Porthcawl. The second area we'll consider is an update on the marketing at the food retail site in Porthcawl. Cabinet members may recall the previously approved Cabinet report detailing the Section 123 notice to commence the potential disposal process for the land in this area, and we'll be updating on that process in this report. And then finally, we'll also be bringing to Cabinet members' attention some necessary steps for what I'd consider to be a tidying up of some parcels of land that sit within the proposed regeneration area, without which we'd really have a rather piecemeal development. And in order to take it forward in a comprehensive strategic way, there are really some parcels of land that we need to take ownership of, and whilst we will look at negotiation with title holders, if necessary, consider compulsory purchase order and seek the way forward on that. So moving forward, I'll go on to 4.1, which is the local development plan section of the report, and I would bring members' attention also to Appendix 1, a plan of the area, which members will find of interest. Members will be aware that the site is already in the current existing local development plan, and for obvious reasons we wouldn't want to lose the opportunity to keep it in the new LDP as we move forward. Otherwise we wouldn't be able to develop the area, and hence the site has again been put forward as a candidate site for consideration in the next phase of LDP, covering us up to 2033. You will see attached on Appendix 1 the proposed land use framework, a master plan for consideration that will be submitted as part of that LDP process. What I would highlight at this juncture for members is putting forward the proposed land use plan that is attached to the report is not a fait accompli. What it means is it would form part of the draft LDP, which will be published and formally consulted on early in 2021. Members will be aware there's a report on the time frames for the LDP coming to council tomorrow, actually, that will explain the broader process in regard to the LDP. So this isn't the final iteration, but it is certainly outlined in the intentions with regard to the mixed use of the site. And there will also be other opportunities for informal engagement sessions, which we would plan to do as we move forward with the individual phases of development. The next phase, would be, as we move forward to redefining the Hillsborough car park and the Salt Lake section, we would look to do some more interactive engagement with the local population as we move forward. Moving on to the second area for consideration and update note, which is the food store site. As I mentioned, members may recall the Cabinet report on the Section 123 notice that was previously brought before members and approved. We are now looking to move forward with that site. A development brief has been approved by the DC committee, which is setting out some acceptable criteria of quality and design, so that bidders for the site with the sale of the site there would have to live up to. Effectively, we're not going to just allow any old box to be put up on what is a gateway entrance to the Porthcawl area. It certainly needs to be something that is suitable. But ultimately, as long as bidders can meet high-spec criteria in terms of quality, then we will be statutory duty-bound to then accept the highest bid from the bidding process for the authority. It's anticipated that marketing at the site will commence in autumn 2020. Bids will be received and appraised by the end of the calendar year. I'll move now on to the final area for consideration for members, and that's the bit I touched on with the land acquisition and potential compulsory purchase orders that we may need to do. This links to Appendix 3 of the report, where you can see a map of the whole area and the red boundaried areas, which are the parcels of land that we'll be looking to acquire. They're mostly little bits of unadopted roads which we need to tidy up, and if you're a local member familiar with the area, you may know as the old Monster Park. I certainly recall it from being a child, wandering around there looking at plastic dinosaurs licking an ice cream, but that area of land also needs to be acquired. We will attempt to acquire the land through negotiation. However, it may not be possible to acquire that by agreement, and if necessarily, then we'd look to use powers under the Town and Country Planning Act 1990 to secure the land as a compulsory purchase. I draw members' attention to section 4.33 of the report, which outlines the criteria where it's appropriate to use those compulsory purchase powers, and the end of that paragraph where it outlines section A, B and C, where it's appropriate if the acquisition through the compulsory purchase powers promotes or improves the economic well-being of the area, the social well-being of the area, and the environmental well-being of the area. And I think members would all agree the proposed regeneration of this part of Porthcawl would tick certainly all of those boxes. I'd move members on next through the report to the financial implications section. Just a reminder to members firstly that the receipt that we will obtain from the sale of the food store site will generate a capital receipt which will be reinvested in the area and ploughed into initially the upgrading of the Hillsborough car park. That's been before members previously, and just a reminder on that basis. And that the cost for the acquisition of these parcels of land that I've discussed and shown on Appendix 3, the cost would be met by not just ourselves, but shared between the major landholders for the regeneration process. We'll take members then to the recommendations at part 9 of the report, which is firstly to note the intention to submit the land use framework as part of the LDP. Secondly, to note the progress with the proposed marketing of the sale of land forming part of the green in Salt Lake for use as a food store site. And finally, to approve officers to take the necessary steps to acquire the land on the attached plan Appendix 3, including taking necessary steps for making a compulsory purchase order. My final comment is it's also really good to see, with the officers that have been heavily involved with this scheme, the really great progress that's being made. That it's been a long time in the making through to the point where we managed to acquire the rights within Salt Lake, and things are now able to move on, and officers are moving this project on, which is really good to see.
Yes, thank you, Zach. Very, very exciting time indeed for the town of Porthcawl and for the county borough, and thanks for that update. I know you're very proud to give that report because you are a Porthcawl boy after all, born and bred in the town. So I'll now ask Councillor Smith to come in, please.
Yeah, thanks. And I'd like to start by echoing what Zach said about the officers. The officers have worked incredibly hard on this. We can't use COVID as an excuse for everything, but COVID has delayed things and slowed things down. But I think we are making genuine progress now. Zach mentioned engagement. I don't take much notice of social media, but I saw one or two people piling in about consultations this morning. I noticed one reference to the 6 people who run Bridgend County Borough Council, and apparently I'm one of them, but nobody bothered to tell me, so I didn't know that. But I think that is a caricature of what actually happens. For example, personally, I have engaged either myself or along with officers with Porthcawl Town Council at a meeting they called. I've been to the Shout Forum by invitation. I've been to the Civic Trust at least twice, perhaps even 3 or 4 times. I've spoken to Sustainable Wales, a gathering that they called. And we got another meeting, I hope, a virtual meeting now with the Sustainable Wales to take some of their ideas forward for a low-carbon development at Porthcawl. And with a couple of officers, we had a very, very nice time at Porthcawl Comprehensive School, where we engaged with the school council on the younger generations and the future generations' view of Porthcawl. The leader, Councillor Young, and myself have been to talk to the RNLI about specifically about the Eastern Prom and some ambitions they've got along there. We've engaged with what we now call the members of the Senate, the regional and the constituency one, and the MP. But last but by no means least, at every single stage of the developments in Porthcawl, we engage with the local county borough members, and they are key. They are our eyes and ears in Porthcawl. They can transmit information both ways and give us feedback. So I'd like to say big thanks to Councillor Brian Jones, Councillors Mike Clark and Nora Clark, Councillor Apsey and Councillor Watts, because the Chief Executive and Zach and myself have met with them at every stage. I suppose the most crucial stage of all was when we invested money in buying out the leasehold at Salt Lake, and they were with us all the way on that decision. There are 4 things about the development I'd like to highlight. One is the leisure site. Contrary to popular belief, this development isn't all about housing. It is a mixed development. The leisure site is there, and the plan that we presented to Porthcawl Town Council a little while back, and I don't think that plan has changed, is that in the initial stage there'll be a short-term lease on that site, and then there'll be a longer-term lease to follow up. The idea being that councillors and not even planners are qualified to identify what the market will want for a leisure site in advance. So we don't want to plan anything in, and we don't want to plan anything out. As that site develops and becomes more and more of an attraction, we want the market and the people who really know about leisure to come in and make offers for that site. So in the short term, who knows, it could be something like a winter ice rink and a summer Ferris wheel, and then something else in the longer term. I also want to draw attention to the revised detail in the master plan for the Eastern Promenade. The Eastern Promenade is no longer seen as a vehicular route. It'll be pedestrianised. Apart from active travel routes, it'll become a proper esplanade and a proper promenade. And Cabinet members are very keen that the seaward-facing properties, again, nothing should be designed in and nothing should be designed out. So the opportunity should be there for mixed development, and then facilities to grow organically there in response to what people want to see there, as the Eastern Promenade becomes a real focus point for Porthcawl. And lastly, the very important point that Zach made, again, contrary to popular belief, we don't see the Porthcawl development as a milk cow that we'll use to extract money out of the good folk of Porthcawl. It's an investment into Porthcawl, and a token of that is the fact that when the retail site is leased, the capital receipt from that will be recycled into the Porthcawl development. So unless anybody wants to say anything more or ask Zach questions, I propose that we adopt the recommendations, Leader.
Okay, thank you for moving the recommendations. I know that Councillor White wanted to come in and ask a question. Councillor White.
Thank you, Leader, and happy to support and second Councillor Smith's proposal recommendations. And thank you, Zach. What an exciting project and regeneration going ahead here for Porthcawl. And can I add, I still have very fond memories of holiday in Porthcawl in the miners' fortnight in the 50s and 60s. And I hope now I'm not looked upon as one of those dinosaurs that you might see Zach walking around with ice cream.
Well, I'm sure not, Councillor.
No, look, very exciting. I think Councillor Smith really just summed it up at the very end, is the question I was going to ask you. That the very important key messages here is through our engagement, and it will be in stages and it will be phased, and I appreciate that, Zach. And maybe if you could just touch a little bit more on what we actually how we're going to start and commence that engagement process. But I think the message, importantly, is what Councillor Smith just said in the very tail end, is that our approach is the reinvestment, and that's an ongoing reinvestment, step by step through the development. And I think that message needs to be laid out very clearly at the onset, Zach, and not as we determine and proceed with engagement. But I'm sure you will have that message spelled out. So what the question is, when are we likely to commence that engagement consultation scenario, Zach?
Okay, Councillor. So there will be this formal consultation junctures. So one of the main ones, obviously, various stages in planning and traffic orders. They've all got various junctures with his formal consultation elements for any development. But in this process, the big one is obviously the formal consultation that will take place on the draft LDP, which is for the whole of Bridgend and obviously includes the proposals that we're talking about today. So that will be early 2021. That's the formal aspect in terms of, you know, the legally required consultation. But certainly, you know, with all of the discussions that have taken place that Councillor Smith has referenced with local members, you know, with officers, everyone is agreed that there needs to be more than just that statutory consultation process, and that engagement, which has already commenced, as Councillor Smith, there's been lots of engagement all the way through anyway, but there will definitely be a engagement activity and process which we will shape and define that will take place prior to the commencement on the first phase and the regeneration area of Hillsborough Car Park, which is relatively straightforward, and the first phase of Salt Lake Car Park. So we would look to tailor an engagement package to take that forward, just to really define some of the detail. In timescale terms, it would probably be shortly after the LDP formal consultation process on the broader piece, and then we'll look to come forward with something specific on that next phase of development in the Salt Lake Car Park area and Hillsborough.
Thank you, Zach.
Okay, thank you for that, Zach. And also, I just like to bring the deputy leader in, please.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. And I agree with all the comments regarding the land use element. You know, this is just a stage in the process. Nothing has been decided at this point. We'll continue the negotiations and consultations with the local people of Porthcawl, and also the developers who we obviously hope will make Porthcawl, or not make Porthcawl, continue to make Porthcawl the #1 visitor attraction in South Wales. But I want to come on to the CPO element of this report, and I want to sort of give out some assurances really that this will be a last resort. We do sincerely hope that land owners will engage with us and see the value that this development will have to Porthcawl. But Zach, I'm just wondering, are there any sort of timelines on this where we need to get this these issues resolved by, just to so they're not going to run for forever?
We haven't fixed the actual timelines. We haven't said by this date, you know, we'll give up on negotiations. I mean, we're asking for permission to go ahead with the steps for a compulsory purchase order, but that doesn't mean we're bypassing negotiations. And absolutely, as you said, if we can achieve the objectives of tidying up these pieces of land purely by negotiation without the need for the CPO, then that's preferable to all parties concerned. But it is just because of what you mentioned, because we wouldn't want it to drag and have an extended sort of never-ended negotiation process, that we also do need this ability to move it forwards no matter what. Clearly most of these parcels of land are in what would be the phase 2, so it's not an immediate time pressure, and hence we haven't got the set dates, sort of next June or whatever. We haven't got a defined calendar date just yet, but we do need to move it on, and hence the need for the compulsory purchase order ability. In terms of, and I fully agree, it's not the preferable way forward if the negotiation can be successful, but we're also aware the negotiations require resources on both sides, and sometimes, that can be difficult for the other parties. So we just want the ability to move it forward no matter what the circumstance. And the good thing here is, we're not talking about some residential dwellings that are in the way or commercial business. In human rights terms, these effectively empty plots of land or unadopted areas of highway. So, there's no human rights issues, and moving forward, isn't going to, cause some huge upset because we're turfing somebody out of their house or anything of that nature.
Yeah, thank you for that explanation. I'm happy to second the report.
Okay, thank you for that, Deputy Leader and Zach. And whilst, of course, there will continue to be engagement and consultation on the plans for this site, can you confirm, Zach, that the fundamental principles of development on Salt Lake are well established, and they're well established through a series of plans, including the local development plan and master planning of the site, that were all subject to significant public consultation before they were adopted by this authority. Significant public consultation, and those plans were adopted by the whole council, as Councillor Smith has said, not just by the Cabinet, but by full council, or by the council's Development Control Committee.
Yes, absolutely, Leader. All statutory required consultation exercises, every step along the way thus far and moving forward, will be complied with. And as we've discussed, we're looking to do engagement on top of what is required from a statutory perspective as well. And you know, as Councillor Smith outlined, you know, has already taken place, with Councillor Smith actually being very heavily personally involved with that process as well. In terms of process to make sure things are moving along as well, Leader, one thing I would highlight that I didn't highlight from within the report is that with the sale of the food store site, we're also going to make sure it's just not land banked. You know, we don't get some developer that comes along, puts forward a nice plan, and then doesn't actually develop it for quite a considerable period of time. So there's a caveat within that sale that the developer does actually have to move ahead and create the development, otherwise the land will return to us. So that is also within the process that's been defined.
Okay, thank you for that, Zach, and I certainly very much welcome this report. I actually welcome the proposal for a small supermarket on the site, because I do think that the residents of Porthcawl should have more choice, should have competition in terms of the supermarket in the town. There is only one large supermarket there currently, and we know that large numbers of people will drive out of Porthcawl to shop in different places, and we can keep some of that spend within the town of Porthcawl. And there is that commitment. I would repeat that the receipt from the sale of land will be invested back into the town of Porthcawl in infrastructure improvements, and that is a commitment that we will honour. And I'm also very pleased that our plans for the Eastern Promenade to secure that as vital sea defences for the town, but also create a much more attractive and welcoming and important destination for people. Those plans are also progressing very well, and we will bring those details back to Cabinet once we've got them around the next stage of that part of the regeneration of Porthcawl. Okay, so all members in agreement with the recommendations moved and seconded, please?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also not included in the report, but an area that we are committed to looking at is ensuring that any housing on the site is as green as it possibly can be. When I say green, I mean sustainable housing that has the lowest possible carbon emissions through energy use. I think it's an aspiration of ours that there's zero carbon emissions through ongoing energy use, and that is a aim that we will look to adopt, and we believe that we can set a good example for other developments, because we do want this to be an exemplar for the future, and we believe it can be. Okay, thank you all. So thank you, Zach. The next report on the agenda is a report of the Head of Partnership Services, and it is on the services for the victims of domestic abuse. Martin, please.
Peter, I'm not sure Martin's with us.
Right, okay then, Mark. So, Mark, you will be the super sub then for this item. So over to you then, please, Mark.
I think, Leader, the view is that in view of the need to potentially address proper stakeholder consultation across the board, that this report should be deferred for a month to allow that to happen. We're conscious that there are a number of stakeholders where potentially we would need to have more detailed discussions over the next few weeks. So I think the recommendation to you, Leader, is that we defer this report for a month and bring it back to you in a month's time, having carried out that further stakeholder engagement.
Okay, thank you for that proposal, Mark. Councillor Patel is the lead member.
Yeah, I'm happy. Yeah, no, I think I support the Chief Executive in his proposal to defer the item for a month.
I'm happy to second that, Leader.
Okay, are all Cabinet members in agreement with that?
Aye.
Yes, yes.
Thank you. So we will now take item 8 on the agenda, and that is a report of the Chief Executive on the COVID-19 prevention and response plan for our health region, the Cwm Taf Morgannwg region. Mark, please.
Thank you, Leader. As you say, the purpose of this report is to seek Cabinet endorsement of the COVID-19 prevention and response plan for the Cwm Taf Morgannwg region. It's actually a relatively short report, but with lengthy documentation appended to it. So there are a number of appendices. So what I suggest is, obviously, I'm not going to go through the detail of all of those appendices, but Kelly and I will certainly attempt to answer any questions that you may have at the conclusion of my brief run through. I think perhaps as a starting point, of course, this is particularly topical at the moment, with seemingly an increasing infection rate in the South Wales area over the last week or so, and the threat of a second wave or spike, and potentially even local lockdowns, as unfortunately we've seen as near as Caerphilly in the last fortnight, really, where that has been required in view of the number of COVID cases locally. I think the thing to stress at this stage is, of course, that those rates remain much lower in Bridgend, and we're very grateful for that, and we're still working very hard at that. But this is really about being prepared and preempting really what might be required in circumstances where we too may be required to take appropriate action locally, depending on the particular circumstances. The background to this is that the Welsh Government obliged local health boards and their constituent local authorities to develop an appropriate response plan in partnership. So this is very much a shared regional Cwmtaf Morgannwg plan that, just for information, has already been endorsed by RCT and Merthyr councils. Obviously, the idea here is to give some consistency in terms of the approach and the criteria that are taken by each of the local authority areas, but also recognise that there is some local flexibility depending on circumstances. So again, just to give you a very real example, we will know at the moment that the infection rates are much, much higher in RCT and Merthyr, and while therefore there are some measures that we've chosen to undertake over the last week or so, there are others that of course are more severe and stricter within RCT and within Merthyr. The plan itself, if I refer to paragraph 3.2, has three key elements. They are preventing the spread of the virus, and that's predominantly around the contact tracing and case management, sampling and testing, and population surveillance. And then all of the plans across Wales are based on 6 national principles that are set out in paragraph 3.2, which are intended and are set by Welsh Government, are intended to ensure an effective implementation of an integrated plan, but based on national guidance as well. So there's some consistency across Wales. I think in paragraph 3.3, one of the things I'd like to pick up on, Leader, is the crucial role of local government in the COVID-19 response. And particularly with regard to any potential implementation of any local lockdown. So we know, we already know local authorities have a very, very strong role in the provision of social care, in the support to our most vulnerable residents, the provision of childcare hubs, supporting essential workers and vulnerable children, maintaining essential services. But more recently, and actually of course very new really over the last 6 months, increasingly you've heard me talk before about our increasing public health role, and that includes then the provision of the TTP, the Track, Trace and Protect programme in response to incidents and outbreaks, and that other roles around supporting the health board, for example, in preparation for max vaccination programmes, and indeed also in terms like increased education and enforcement, and you made reference to this earlier on with regard to our shared regulatory service. So what we have are a number of things that we've done historically, but actually a whole range of new things as well that increasingly are additional things that the local authorities expected to certainly be involved in and sometimes lead on. In terms of that overall public health response, there are 6 work streams that have been established on a regional basis. These cover surveillance, sampling and testing, contract tracing and case management, risk communication and community engagement, protection and mass vaccination. And there are groups involving key officers, including from this authority, working on those areas that report weekly to the Regional Strategic Oversight Group, again, in which we are represented, and Kelly is our representative on that. And then that feeds through in terms of governance to a weekly meeting of the chief executives of the Health Board, a Public Health Wales senior representative, and the chief executives then, myself representing Bridgend, and my fellow chief executives representing RCT and Merthyr. And what that ensures, particularly at a time of emergency and potentially crisis, is that there is regular meetings and opportunities to consider and monitor information and make the appropriate decisions. And again, just to give you a very real example of that, we are having information on a daily basis fed through at the moment by Public Health Wales and by the Director of Public Health in Cwmtaf Morgannwg. That monitors very closely how the infection is spreading, not just on a county borough area, but actually on a super output area, so broken down into small parts of the county borough, and that allows us to make the appropriate decisions based on that information, but also ensure there's an appropriate degree of coordination and consistency across the patch. So I think Appendix 1 sets out the plan for your endorsement. I hope that you've had the chance to read it and you'll agree that it's a robust approach, setting out clearly our response, detailed descriptions of the roles, objectives and measures for each work stream, and supporting in the other appendice an action plan which sets out again the measures to stop the spread of the infection, to mitigate and control the impact of it, and proactive management of it, robust enforcement where necessary, which is becoming increasingly important, to monitor carefully the infection through surveillance, and again that's part of our programs of work, to escalate any actions or restrictions in the event of an outbreak. And that, of course, is where our normal governance procedures would come in. And of course, that would be a decision that would be made with Cabinet, by Cabinet, either as part of a formal Cabinet report, or if time didn't allow that, as part of the emergency delegated powers. So just to reiterate then, the crucial role that Bridgend has and local government has in this, in particular the implementation of the TTP programme, as I've said, and also the implementation of any enhanced measures that may be required with regard to any local lockdown arrangements, and those are set out in Appendix 4 and 5. So just in conclusion, Leader, really, I hope that the plan itself gives you some reassurance around the planning and coordination of our local response. And just to reiterate, it's a plan as well that of course will evolve. It can be updated on a regular basis as we learn more, not just about the virus, but as we learn more about what the effective measures are in terms of local lockdowns. Of course, I sincerely hope that we never have to use it, but it's a really important document that is there to ensure that we can respond as effectively and as quickly as possible in the event that we have to do so based on our own local circumstances. And with that, Leader, I take you to the recommendations for you to consider. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Mark. I'll bring Councillor Patel in first, then Councillor White, please. Councillor Patel.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Mark. It was a very detailed report. It took me quite some time to get through it, but I managed. And I'm happy to move the recommendations. I think it sets out quite clearly what the roles are and what the processes are, or what we can expect them to be. So I think it's always good for us to have that somewhere that it's easy for us to find. One thing I noted on the report is that we've committed 40 contact tracers or contact advisors even from Bridgend, and I think I'm grateful for those people that work for the authority to volunteer to go over and actually do the contact advising work, because it is really important and it is how we're going to get over this virus. So I am grateful to them. The other thing I'd like to point out, as we have got a lot of local members online, I think, in the virtual cabinet meeting, the surveillance appendices, I think in 8, is really interesting information. I think it's the first time I've seen this sort of level of detail over how many cases there are locally. So I would recommend, if you haven't managed to get that far, to have a look at that, because it made a really interesting read. Yes, I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Patel. I'll bring Councillor White in next, then, please, and then Kelly. Thank you.
I am here, coming in.
Thanks, Councillor White.
If I get my video going, I'm not sure if you want to see my mugshot. I can't, don't worry. Okay, yeah, happy to second the recommendations, Leader. A couple of questions, if I could. But first of all, can I say a big thank you and congratulations to all those concerned in keeping Bridgend as safe as they can be in the current circumstances. And for obvious reasons, looking forward, I'm always going to be concerned about our situation in our care homes, and that they are, I'd like to think, in that priority area in all our future planning. And of course, myself, as you know, and the Chief Executive and Leader was with the Health Board and our neighbouring authorities at a briefing last week. And as you know, moving towards a position of closer lockdown in RCT and Merthyr as a result of the outbreaks. But I think credit to us all here in Bridgend, you've done a fantastic job and keeping us where we are. But that could change quite easily overnight, as Mark reiterated something earlier. And the best laid plans could be all put and laid to rest because the circumstances could change very quickly. So I think from my end, Leader, if I could, what I'd like to ask of Mark and Kelly is our track and trace procedures and our enforcement measures, are they robust enough and in place to deal with the outbreaks that we are now witnessing in the health region? And in particular, there was some talk last week, Mark, about RCT and Merthyr actually engaging and bringing on more enforcement officers. Is that something that we've considered in a bit more detail here in Bridgend?
Thank you. May I, Leader, just respond?
Yes, please do, Mark. Please do.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor and Councillor Patel. I'll perhaps cover a couple of things really, which will hopefully answer your questions. The first batch of people that have been appointed, there are 8 additional, effectively, they're almost like education officers really. So on top of our normal TTP officers, there's been a view that what is actually needed on the ground are additional people to help advise and educate, whether that's local businesses, local people, whatever it might be. And those people are on a shared basis. So those initial 8 are to be shared across RCT, Merthyr and Bridgend. You're quite right to identify that may be insufficient, and so therefore it may well be that we have to invest in further people. But those initial 8 have been approved by Welsh Government and actually comes from the initial TTP funding. They've given us approval to do that. I think I made the point earlier that I suppose one of the things that's happening is we're learning as we go along about exactly what resource is required, and I think the evidence from Merthyr and RCT last week is actually those people on the ground that play a crucial role in terms of guiding and, as I say, educating as opposed to initially enforcing. So you make a fair point, but what I would also say is I know Welsh Government are very, very keen on what they call mutual aid, essentially. In other words, at different times in Wales there may well be different clusters and different outbreaks in different parts of Wales, and therefore rather than having perhaps each authority employ 15-20 people and a lot of them standing idle, what they would like to see is those mutual aid arrangements being formalised so that depending on where the outbreak is at any given point, then potentially we can call upon additional resource from elsewhere. And I think that's already working on an informal basis reasonably effectively. The other point you made briefly about care homes was that I think probably it's worth me reiterating that sometimes circumstances and advice, in particular from the director, the public health director in Cwm Tarpaganu, does mean that we have to make some decisions that might be regarded as unpopular. So you'll know that we last week took the advice of the Director of Public Health and we chose to stop for the time being indoor visits to care homes. Now that is very much based on advice, but it's very much preemptive, and it's to protect the most vulnerable residents that we have in our care homes and recognising the porous nature of the borders. So while the figures themselves in Bridgend may not be that high at the moment, we know that simply just over the border they are much, much higher. So from time to time there are going to be some things that people perhaps may object to. I hope they understand in the round, but you know, there are things that we will have to do. I made the point earlier that one of the key priorities is the protection of the public, and there will be things we have to do in order to protect the public. And I think what this plan sets out is to try to give some guidance about when that might be necessary. But what I would just say as a caveat, it'll always be based on discussion and individual circumstances at that time. It's very difficult to be absolutely black and white and say when something may apply or not apply. But what this does is give a very good guide to the kind of things that we'd be looking at, as I say, on a daily basis.
Can I come back there, Leader, only very quickly?
Yeah, of course you can.
Mark, can I wholeheartedly say that I fully support our decisions taken last week with regards to visiting for care homes, because I said that is a priority area for us, and we're going to do our damnedest, right, to make sure that we keep everybody safe. Mark, is there, because we've had a lot of information just the last 24, 48 hours regarding our schools, is there anything further regarding what we can be doing there, or is there anything further that we are or we will be doing?
I think, Councillor White, the general advice remains the same, and that's just about reiterating and promoting good behaviours around social distancing, hygiene, and all of the things that perhaps become a bit blasé about because we've been told them for 6 months. Beyond that, I think, unfortunately, it was always expected, and perhaps to an extent it was inevitable, that there would be some outbreaks in schools as schools reopened and children came back together. I think the key thing for us is that we're able to manage that effectively and with as little disruption as possible. And I think what we now have are a set of procedures and indeed a set of frequently answered questions that the Director of Education has put together, which allows us to manage each of those occasions and recognising that they're all slightly different depending on where the outbreak is and who it is, and which sort of who they've been mixing with. But we're going to have to get used to some extent in managing in very challenging and different circumstances. And most of the time, we will try and maintain some sort of business as usual, but take the appropriate measures again to keep the public safe. So I'm not sure there's anything specifically more we can do in terms of avoiding it, other than the general advice, which I keep promoting, and I know the leader does, and we do through our comms, which is that it's about our behaviours, and I think we heard the Welsh Health Secretary yesterday saying it's very much that we've got 6 or 7 weeks to perhaps change our behaviours and stabilise that R number, otherwise we may be heading towards a lockdown. Of course, we all want to avoid that. So I think that's probably the key thing, is just reiterating those good practice behaviours across the board.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks for that, Councillor White and Mark. Kelly, you wanted to come in, please, Kelly.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I just wanted to, on the issue that the Councillor Patel raised, really, about the TTP team, I just wanted to confirm that since the 1st of September, that team now is being hosted by RCT on behalf of the 3 authorities. Some BCBC staff have been seconded to RCT to assist in that programme, and quite a large number of SRS staff have also gone over to the regional team. As you can imagine, with the spikes we've had in the last week or so, it has put tremendous pressure on that team, and they are looking to recruit more staff. The amount of contacts that have been generated are quite significant. We're talking in the hundreds of people they'd have into contact on a daily basis. So they are looking at people who were previously in the TTP team, who've gone back to their substantive role. They are going to look to see if they can perhaps take those back on for a short period until their recruitment is finished and they're up to full strength.
Okay, thanks for that, Kelly. And that's a reminder of how the pandemic is changing rapidly in terms of its impact and the infection rates and levels, and the lockdown that Caerphilly has been put into is a stark reminder of the risks that we face if the virus is not contained within Bridgend. And we're seeing on our doorstep, just across the book in the Rhondda Valley, cases are rising rapidly, and we cannot afford to take that risk with our communities. We need everyone to help in that fight against the virus. However, if numbers begin to rise, and they're stable at the moment, aren't they, Mark? If the number of positive cases rise rapidly, as they have elsewhere in Wales, then we will have to take action. And that action could be lockdown. It cannot be ruled out. And therefore, if the vast majority of the residents of Bridgend continue to do what they've done so far, and that's to behave responsibly, behave safely, then we can avoid that lockdown in Bridgend. But it will rely on the continued support of our communities and people being vigilant and being careful and following the advice that we all keep hearing from Welsh Government and Public Health Wales. Okay, the recommendation is that the Cabinet note the report, and that's been moved by Councillor Patel. Is everyone in agreement with that recommendation, please?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, colleagues. We now will receive a report on the on the updated corporate plan, and I will ask that the Chief Executive presents this report. Please, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you again, Leader. The purpose of this report is to seek Cabinet endorsement of the updates to the Council's corporate plan, which of course has been reviewed following the impact of COVID-19, and then also to endorse that it is submitted, the revised corporate plan is submitted to Council for approval. I think it's probably just helpful, again, if I explain a little bit of background here. The original corporate plan was approved, of course, pre-pandemic, so back in February 2020, and of course at the time it was approved on the basis that the priorities that were set out and the measures that were set out and the objectives and targets that were set out were of course eminently sensible at that point. However, we recognise that some of those priorities, objectives, measures and indeed risks of course have changed based on the impact of COVID-19, and indeed some are not even now deliverable, and I'll come back to that point. So effectively, Leader, this is an opportunity to reset some of our corporate plan in that sort of post-COVID context and refocus some of our priorities, recognising the role that we have, particularly in terms of recovery. And of course we heard earlier on about some of the recovery recommendations that have been made by the cross-party panel, and also just recognising, as I just described in the previous item, some of the new roles of the local authority moving forward now, which perhaps certainly weren't as obvious or perhaps didn't exist at all back in February. So the overall corporate plan, of course, a lot of it remains largely the same, and a lot of the objectives and priorities remain the same, including our main 3 wellbeing objectives and our contribution to the 7 national wellbeing goals in the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. But of course, some of the detail has changed, and really that's what I want to focus on, is where there's been change. So again, rather than going through what is a lengthy report, including the appendice, what I'll attempt to do, Leader, is just pick out some of the main changes to highlight to you some of the differences between the original plan that was endorsed and this one now. And I think it's Appendix A that in the main sets out those changes and revisits some of the targets. So for example, I said I'd come back to, in the original plan, there were very specific and reasonably ambitious targets, for example, around town centre footfall. Well, clearly, over the sort of first 4 months of this financial year, footfall in our towns was negligible, and therefore those targets now are rather meaningless, and therefore those sort of things have been changed, recognising some of the changes. And the other point I just want to make at this point is that logically as well, the medium-term financial strategy and the corporate plan are aligned. And so what we'd also expect is if we adopt new priorities and new objectives in the corporate plan, then that would be followed through in the exercise that we're currently undergoing, which is also reviewing the medium-term financial strategy and recognising there are new areas of investment that we need to make in terms of our recovery in particular. So if I just go through some of the main changes and highlight some of those. So in learner outcomes, we've introduced some new measures really, and new objectives based on our need for and a focus on blended learning. So again, we just had the question on schools in the last item. If we're honest, we can expect that from time to time we may have to have certain year groups working at home if they're self-isolating. We may even have potentially larger lockdowns. I think what that brings into play is the need for us to plan effectively to ensure that people are not put at detriment by that, and that what we're calling blended learning, essentially a mixture between learning in school and learning at home, is brought forward in a different way than it was pre-pandemic. And similarly, that introducing that sort of safe school environment has become a crucial objective for the authority. So again, perhaps not something in the same way that was top of our agenda. Of course, safety is always top of our agenda, but the changes and the unprecedented nature of what we're facing has meant that that has become something that we've highlighted specifically in this revised plan. In terms of economic growth and prosperity, as you might expect, we've recognised that there's enhanced support, particularly around infrastructure support for businesses to overcome the pandemic. Again, if our businesses are to survive and thrive, and you've heard me talk previously about some of the challenges that we think we're going to face economically, over the certainly next 6 months, probably next 12 months, then we know that we're going to have to up the support that we give to local businesses, and that's reflected in the new plan. And similarly, in terms of visitor experience and tourism, again, we know to overcome the challenges that they face, they may have to operate differently, and again, therefore, we're committed to enhance support to allow that to happen. Under the heading of resilient communities, we're picking up again some of this. I think is consistent with the recommendations of the recovery panel, but we're picking up the need to work in partnership much more closely. That includes with town and community councils, but actually with other organisations, including the third sector as well, and to create those long-term sustainable solutions to manage and maintain services and facilities in local communities, and recognising that's something that we want to endure really from the lockdown, and to work more effectively with other organisations, and I suppose establish who does what best and how we can support other organisations to potentially deliver some elements of services on our behalf. There's also some subtle changes under this heading as well, where previously we had very specific targets around leisure and cultural participation. Again, that's changed, recognising we need to rebuild and to some extent rebuild that trust for people to use some of our community facilities, working with our partners, Halo and Owen. And again, over certainly the next 12 months, it's going to be quite a rebuilding and recovery exercise to ensure that people can use those facilities safely. So again, that's been reflected within the revised documentation. And finally, just in terms of highlighting change, in terms of smarter use of resources, and again picking up on some of the recommendations of the recovery panel, as you might expect, we would like to embrace some of the digital transformation and service remodelling. Again, we've had to deliver services very differently over the last 6 months, and in most cases very successfully, albeit in an alternative way. And so that may have consequential implications. There may be less demand on office accommodation, so we need to look at our options around the office accommodation that we hold, not necessarily to sell it, but actually potentially are there other solutions, maybe even other local authorities, perhaps Cardiff and Swansea, where people are commuting a long way. Is there a way of sharing and indeed gaining a revenue from operating differently, and also identifying opportunities for new ways of working and service delivery among our staff? And again, this feeds in quite interestingly really to some of the measures. So at this point, I would say to you, perhaps it's a reasonably good thing to look at how we can work more agilely moving forward, but I know that's not necessarily a view consistently held across the authority. So at this stage, is it a good thing or a bad thing to have a high percentage target for working from home? And I'm sure that's a debate that will no doubt happen not just at council but moving forward as well. So I've run through that quickly, Leader, because again it's a fairly substantial appendice, and we don't have the time to go through it in detail, but I hope what I've given you is a reflection of what I hope are sensible changes, reflecting the significant and unique challenges and circumstances that we faced. So it's rather unusual to revise the corporate plan mid-year in this way, and what we've done is, I hope, done that in a sensible and proportionate way, and hopefully come up with something that's fit for purpose and a realistic corporate plan moving forward. And with that, Leader, I move you to the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mark. Councillor Patel, you wanted to come in, please.
Yes, thanks, Leader, and thanks, Mark. I'm happy to move the recommendations, but I would like a bit of discussion on some of the points in here. So I understand that this is a point where we are taking stock and reflecting on what we plough our limited resources into. And so I understand why some of the targets have been removed. And I guess it's all about, how do you see a target? Do you see it as something that drives you and pushes you for development, or do you see it as something that you want to achieve? I'd like to first start with page 352, which is page 2 of the plan, or on that page, I see that we've taken out the target for vacant premises in Bridgend Town Centre. I think it's important to note that whilst we haven't got a target, we are still working behind the scenes to ensure that the number doesn't increase. So, you know, we've got the free car parking offer for the town centres, and I think that's something where we're trying to help those businesses that are currently in business and occupying spaces within the town centre, trying to give them a little bit of a lifeline through whichever means we can. And I think that is important, even though the rationale behind it in the paper isn't clear. I think it'd just be good to reassure everyone that we are still working on it, even though there's no target. In terms of the startups, which we've deleted, I would like to see that reinstated. I think startup businesses are really important, and I think in Bridgend especially, you know, we've had major employer with Ford, you know, suspending work from this month. Then we've also had the recession, and lots of people are losing their jobs left, right and centre. And I think that a lot of people will think about self-employment and just going into business themselves. I know that through Employability Bridgend, we offer a lot of training and support around that. And I think rather than just deleting it from the report, it should be something that we focus on to help residents in this really difficult time, especially with the ups and downs of the employability market. So that, and then on page 354, in the new edition, so about halfway down, we've in the red bit which says new, I'd like to see after the work in partnership with town and community councils, after that I'd like to see the third sector and community groups. So I'd like the insertion of the third sector into that paragraph, please. And on 359, I have a question in relation to the schemes. So at the bottom, towards the bottom of the page, we talk about the tree cover schemes, the biodiversity schemes, and the local nature reserve enhancement projects. And I understand that the projects have halved, but I didn't understand what half a scheme was. So I don't know if you're able to explain that one to me, please. But taking on board what you've said already, Mark, I do agree. It would be nice to see some targets and new targets around, you know, workforce and working from home, and the amount of people using sustainable transport, and whether or not we're able to see how our workforce travels to work, and and help with that basically.
Okay.
Thanks for that, Councillor Patel. Did you want me to bring Zach in first, or did you want to respond to those points?
Say first of all, if I may, Leader, and Zach may well want to add it. Just in general terms, I just wanted to say I think Councillor Patel makes a fair point. Certainly, the first point with regard to page 352 is potentially a little bit misleading, because you all know and I know that we're working harder than ever in terms of supporting businesses and doing everything we can, including with the Economic Task Force, to ensure not just the resilience of existing business, but also try and promote new businesses. And so maybe it's potentially the target that's the problem, and perhaps the narrative could reflect more accurately, and I'm happy to change that, could reflect more accurately the additional measures that we're taking to both promote new business as well as support existing business. So I think that's a fair point on page 352. Page 354 on the third sector is the easiest of all. I agree totally, and in fact I think we ought to recognise specifically the role of the third sector. So I think that's absolutely key. Zach may want to come in, as you say, but I would suggest that the 1.5 schemes is simply that one of the schemes won't be completed this year, and may well therefore be something that drifts into next year to be completed. But Zach may know more about that than me. On the other hand, he may not, of course, because I may put him on the spot, but he may want to answer and try. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. Mark, Zach, please.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Yeah, just to reiterate some of Mark's points and maybe expand. Certainly, the changes in the area under myself, it's very much about the targets being, effectively due and unfortunately due to COVID being a nonsense this year. Targets are fantastic when you have a base level of performance and then you can set a new target based upon improving from a known base. In so many areas this year, we just don't have a known base. We're into a new world in terms of business and economics and the economy. And effectively, whilst the level of work that those teams are doing is phenomenal, we've got the economic task force that's being set up, the funding that cabinet members approved a few months ago. There's huge amounts of work going into all these areas, employability, etc. But in terms of setting the targets, it just becomes, immeasurable. It's a year for establishing new bases that we can then learn from and set targets as we move forward. Certainly, the specific point Councillor Patel made about the deleted number of startup businesses on page 352. Again, very specifically on page 351, we do say, right there in the middle of the page, that supporting business startups is one of our priorities. It is there in the wording. It's certainly not that we have any intention of stepping away from supporting business startups. It's just, again, having targets in that area, is of no point. So it's deleted, or it could be remained in, but with a nil target for this year, either way. But it's about the target setting. So I'll probably leave it at that. With regard to the tree planting schemes, I don't have any more information than Mark, but I can get some detail from our biodiversity officer and the team across to Councillor Patel outside of the meeting on that point.
Thank you.
Okay,
Zach.
thanks for that, Mark, and Zach rather. Sorry, Zach. That would be helpful if you could provide clarification. Thanks, Councillor Patel. Mark, the version I've seen of the report and the plan did not have reference to the vital work we're currently undertaking since lockdown in supporting rough sleepers. I was really pleased that Welsh Government has invested over 3 million, awarded over 3 million grant to us so that we can continue to support those rough sleepers and keep them off the street, particularly as we move into the cold, wet weather of autumn and winter. I think that needs to be reflected in this plan because it is a shared priority with Welsh Government. So there are objectives in here, but they relate generally to homelessness and prevention of homelessness and people threatened with homelessness, whereas we actually already have, unfortunately, too many people who were sleeping rough and we're supporting them now. Also, I would like, and I propose inclusion in the corporate plan of the development of a strategy that supports the mental health of people, of adults and children, and we develop an action plan alongside that. Obviously recognise that we do a huge amount at the moment through the work, for example, of our assisted recovery centre in Bridgend that supports adults right across Bridgend. But what is important is that we have a strategy developed with our partners, particularly health, that looks at the holistic needs of people and has an action plan about how we support people's mental health from the most acute aspect, an acute need, down to the support we need to provide to many people across the borough, particularly as we go through the pandemic, and that is having a major impact on many people's mental health. And also, I know this is an issue close to many members' hearts. I would like to see us include in the plan. It may have been included, and apologies if it has been, Mark. Is our commitment to recruiting more apprenticeships. So I was very pleased that we recently undertook our latest recruitment, Kelly, of 12 apprentices, or that's underway currently, and I would want us to commit to that in the future, and that is part of our growing our own strategy and succession planning for the organisation.
Thank you, Leader. Just brief response to those, and I think Deb is on the call, so she can pick those up directly with Wanda and the team. One of the challenges, Leader, we have every year is that the corporate plan is never intended to cover all of the council services. As you know, we run 800 services, and lots of those just carry on and are very well run as normal. It's meant to be sort of our improvement plan, and the specific changes here were meant to relate to the year 2021. So I suppose we just need to reflect about whether all of those things are going to be done in that time scale, or whether they're in fact things that should be thought about for next year's corporate plan. So, for example, I agree wholeheartedly about the mental health action plan, but I'm not 100% sure we'll get that done within the time frame. But I think what we'll do is take away those, if that's okay with you, and reflect on them, and if they are able to be introduced with the appropriate narrative and improvement targets, then I think they're all valid, and I wouldn't disagree as a principle at all.
And I'm sure, because we're doing it now, we can include those targets around rough sleepers. And I'm confident around the apprenticeship programme, and I am very keen that we do it around mental health strategy, because it is something that I've been asked by the Youth Council. I did say that we would look at that with Councillor Patel. I know it's a big piece of work, but we have to make that start about bringing all the different initiatives and programmes together to make sure we've got that holistic response to people's mental health needs. So that would be very helpful. Thank you for that, Mark. So the proposal is to accept the recommendation that we endorse the corporate plan and recommend the revised corporate plan to Council for approval, subject to those changes that myself and Councillor Patel have just referred to. Is everyone happy with that? Yes?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Patel. Thank you, everyone. So we'll now move on to the next plan that we have for our consideration today, and that's the development of a strategic equality action plan 2020 to 2024, and that's a report of the Chief Executive. Please, Mark.
I believe, Leader, and I sincerely hope that Nick Bunston is here to present this report for you.
Okay, thank you for that, Mark. Nick. Very warm welcome, Nick, if you're here.
Thank you. Yes, I am here.
How are you, Nick?
I'm good, thank you.
Absolutely.
So just for the recording, my name is Nick Bunston. I'm the Consultation, Engagement and Equality Manager for BCBC. So the purpose of this report is to seek Cabinet approval for adoption of Bridgend County Borough Council Strategic Equality Plan Action Plan for 2020 to 2024. So just as a bit of background, the Equality Act introduces a general duty for us under the public sector equality duty to eliminate discrimination, harassment and victimisation, advance equality of opportunity, and to foster good relations between people who share a protected characteristic and those who do not. The Equality Act also gives us some specific duties, and one of those is to produce equality objectives by producing a strategic equality plan. And then within that, there's an expectation that we also, alongside the strategic equality plan, produce a strategic equality plan action plan that describes objectives on how we will ensure that we deliver equality issues for people in Bridgend and how they will be addressed for the next 4 years. So to date, annual progress reports describing the work that we've done over the last 4 years have been presented to Cabinet Committee Equalities, and they have been presented since 2016 when the last strategic equality plan was introduced. And our intention is to continue to deliver those annual equalities updates for the lifetime of the new strategic equality plan for 2020 to 2024. So Cabinet members will probably recall within the current situation that the Strategic Equality Plan for 2020 to 2024 was approved by Cabinet on the 10th of March 2020, and that is available for you in more detail at Appendix 1. The report that you would have seen back in March 2020 was a Word version of that report. The appendix that you have now is the designed version that we have, which will be available publicly on our website. We've also worked to develop a easy read version of that, and we'll also have an accessible plain text version, which will be available for screen readers. So to develop the Equalities Action Plan, we have reviewed our Strategic Equality Plan for 2016 to 2020 and the action plan that accompanied that. We've given further consideration to each of the protected characteristics and our duty to eliminate discrimination for each of those protected characteristics. We've considered the implementation of the socio-economic duty. So the socio-economic duty, looking at poverty and how we ensure that our policies and our practice does not impact on those who are less well off in our communities, was due to be introduced initially in April of 2020. Due to COVID, that was delayed, and the intention was that that would come into place in October of 2020, but we have now been notified that that has been deferred to March of 2021. But we have thought about the impact of the socio-economic duty and how that will reflect on our strategic equality plan and the action plan in the development of this. We've also considered national and local issues, and again, since the development of the strategic equality plan, the world has moved on and we've had the impact of COVID-19, so it's been really important that we've considered the impact of that in the development of the actions. And of relevance to the strategic equality plan, we've also had the Black Lives Matter campaign. So again, we've taken into consideration some of our responses to the Black Lives Matter campaign in our actions and our outcomes. We've used feedback that we get from local equality groups and issues that are raised with us around hate crime, LGBTQ History Month, those kind of things. So we've taken on board issues that come into us through various forums, including local groups and the Community Cohesion and Equality Forum. So it's really important that we've taken all of that into consideration in the development of the plan, to work with services to have good, challenging, outcome-focused actions that can be delivered over the next 4 years. One thing that is important to note, though, is we don't see this as a static plan. We see it as something that can change over the next 4 years. So as actions are achieved or actions need to change, that's something that we want to see kind of grow and develop as part of this plan. So we don't see it as a static thing that lasts for 4 years. We see it as an emerging plan that can change as our priorities change and as our responses to events in our community need to change. So we carried out a public consultation in relation to the Strategic Equality Plan that began in December 2019 and ended on the 9th of February 2020. During that period, we engaged with lots of community groups and the consultation received 424 responses in total. So going down to 4.4 of the report, our Strategic Equality Plan objectives were set in line with the Equality and Human Rights Commission Is-Wales Fairer report and the public consultation. And we've now developed the following outcome-focused actions that have been developed to reflect both the views of the residents and the stakeholders from across the county borough. And we've identified 25 outcomes and 58 actions within our 6 objectives. So under objective 1, which is education, we have 5 outcomes and a total of 8 actions. And again, they are focused on predominantly on our schools, but also on adult learning and other factors such as violence towards women and girls, to ensure that we have a good comprehensive set of actions around education. Within work, we have 4 outcomes with 12 actions, and here we predominantly focus on our own workforce, but also think about how we can improve opportunities for people in our communities into the world of work and what we can do to support that. In objective 3, which is living standards, which is predominantly around our implementation of the socio-economic duty, we've got 4 outcomes with 7 actions. Again, a lot of this is around our workforce, but also some actions there around, some outcomes and actions around schools, our commitment to low-income families, and our commitment to learners through the implementation of period dignity. Within outcome 4, which is health and well-being, we have 4 outcomes with a total of 14 actions. This is both workforce and community focused. Within objective 5, safety and respect, we have 4 outcomes and a total of 9 actions. Again, here we have some internal actions for our workforce around training and opportunities for training, as well as community actions. And then our final objective, which is objective 6, participation, we have 4 outcomes with a total of 8 actions. In this section around participation, you'll all be aware of how enthusiastic I am about public consultation and ensure we do good, appropriate engagement whenever we have the opportunity to do that, including with community groups, equality groups, and in particular young people. So in this section, we've reflected some of the changes that we may need to see as a result of COVID-19 and our ability to engage face-to-face with people, and how that may need to change to more online engagement, but also to focus there on continuing to engage, in particular, young people and people who are protected under the Equality Act as part of the protected groups, to ensure that their voices are heard as part of the engagement work that we do, and we feel we do well as part of the work we do in BCBC. So the action plan sets out some challenging objectives for us for the next 4 years. We don't see it as something that will be delivered necessarily over the whole 4 years. There may be some objectives that we can deliver in the next 12 months, and hopefully we can then close those off and challenge ourselves further by creating more actions. Some of the objectives will probably stay with us for 4 years and will be throughout the lifetime of the Strategic Equality Plan. We will review it annually, and we will report progress to Cabinet Committee Equalities annually. And we hope that there will be some really positive impact on both our community and our workforce as a result of this Strategic Equality Plan action plan. Going down to section 6, there is a full equality impact assessment that's being carried out as part of the development of the Strategic Equality Plan action plan, and there's also a full assessment of the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act assessment that accompanies the Strategic Equality Plan action plan. So going down to the recommendation is that Cabinet approves and adopts the Authority's Strategic Equality Plan action plan for 2020 to 2024. I appreciate there are 4 appendices to have a look at. 1 which you've already seen, which is the Strategic Equality Plan, and then 3 other appendices which are fairly lengthy, but hope that I've given you a flavour of what's within those appendices in this report, and ask for any questions if there are any, so I can feedback.
Okay, thanks for that a comprehensive report, Nick, and all the work you've done on bringing us this far. And I'll bring in then Councillor Patel, who of course is our lead for equalities and chairs the Cabinet Committee for Equalities, and has also been very closely involved in the development of this action plan too. So Councillor Patel, please.
Thank you, Leader, and thanks, Nick. I would like to formally move that we adopt the action plan. I feel like it's very exciting this project. I think it's different. It has a different feel about it. I think it's a lot clearer and a lot easier for us to establish what we've committed to and where we're going with the different actions. I'm really pleased to see that we've got a commitment around the menopause, around play, around holiday hunger, and the gender pay gap. We've also got we've expanded that ambition in relation to not just reporting on the gender pay gap, but also on the pay gap between, or possible pay gaps with BAME and disabled employees. I think that's something that we haven't done before, and it's really good that we've started to kind of take what we've been doing and now expand it and develop it. And the actions based and outcomes based plan is, for me, where all plans should be. As Nick mentioned, it is evolving, so I haven't just set today something that we can't add to in the future. I personally like to see some themes around healthy relationships and work around hidden disabilities in the next 4 years, and so we could be bringing that on online as and when we have the momentum, capacity, and the resources to do so. So I'm really happy with the action plan, and I'm happy to move it as well.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Patel. I'll now bring in Councillor Smith, please.
Just a quick one. Just to let you know, I won't turn on my vision because my screen is shimmering, and I've driven to Barnard Castle to make sure it's not my eyesight. It's something wrong with the screen, it is. So I hope my whole computer isn't going to crash, but just wanted to thank the team for that report, and also recommend people have a look at page 393 where some aspects of the school curriculum are discussed. The issue of Black Lives Matter in the curriculum, and also the issue of hate-related bullying. I remember in the days when we used to design our own curriculums as teachers in Porth Comprehensive School, we paid special attention to a topic called the slave triangle. This was in the 1970s when Alex Haley's book Roots, which was a semi-fictionalized account of his ancestors who were taken to the States from the Gambia. That was a very important thing on the television, certainly the first series, and I'm guessing that the curriculum has sort of gone backwards since then, and there are some very good sources around and some very good speakers and writers who are dealing with that part of the curriculum, and we need to seek them out and make sure that they are in our new school curriculums.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Patel, Councillor Smith. You're absolutely right to point out the need to get that curriculum right, and it's an area that obviously Welsh Government have been very focused on, and we are seeing the delivery of an implementation of a new curriculum in Wales. And alongside that, I'm really pleased that we are offering more training now than ever before in our schools, and we will want to expand on that further in the coming months to make sure that that training is available to any school that needs it or wants it. Deputy Leader, please.
Yeah, thanks, Leader. I'm pleased to see on page 396 a reaffirmation of our commitment to the real living wage to all council employees. That's a key policy for us.
Absolutely, Deputy Leader, and I know that that's a key priority for many of our members too, and I know how well received it was by trade union colleagues and staff, and it's a commitment that we will honour in the coming years. Okay, the report has been moved and seconded, and the proposal is that it's adopted. I should emphasise that we have a Cabinet Committee for Equalities, and that committee, chaired by Councillor Patel, with cross-party membership who are invited to participate and do participate in full, I have to say, and contribute very effectively. That Cabinet Committee will, I'm sure, provide microscopic scrutiny and oversight of the plan to make sure that it is implemented, and it does evolve over the coming years as different challenges are identified for our communities. Okay, everyone in support of that recommendation?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Thank you, colleagues. The next plan that we have to consider is the 5-year plan or strategic service delivery plan for social services. And I will ask the Head of Adult Social Care to present this report. Jackie, please.
Okay, thank you, Leader. So in terms of the report that's in front of you this afternoon, we'd like to present to Cabinet the public consultation feedback from the Social Services Delivery Plan, and to note that it's been amended to take on board the feedback from the consultation, from a corporate overview and scrutiny committee, as well as a discussion that took place in Cabinet and Corporate Management Board on the 4th of August. We're looking to seek approval for the plan and the action plan, which covers a 5-year period. As with other reports this afternoon and the appendices today, this is a substantial document. So I propose that I take you through the report to the recommendations, and then Laura and I are available to answer any questions on the detailed plan. So the report explains that the desire and the challenge to improve service remains as a constant within the Social Services and Wellbeing Directorate, and the plan has been developed so it continues the journey of change, but also focuses on the future transformation and service delivery requirements. The plan does provide an executive summary and then goes on to split into challenges in terms of the population and the financial context, and is then split into children's, adults, transition and wellbeing services. The children's services section is then further split into universal services, additional and vulnerable services, and adults are then split into enabling approaches, prevention approaches, specialist preventions, integrated and specialist intervention section. It does contain a detailed action plan, which is shown on pages 572 onwards in today's pack, and page 105 of the plan. I suppose I just wanted to note really that this plan has been around for a little while, and through all our consultation we have sought to strengthen this plan based on the feedback that we've received. So back in March, at the beginning of March, we had a good response to the consultation, and the report details in 4.9 the responses. So 297 returns from that consultation. We also did plan to do a number of focused groups, and that was all planned and they were all set up, but due to the COVID situation in March we were unable to do that. However, the feedback that we have received has been an overwhelming acceptance of what our plan is and the range of ambitions that we will deliver and the service improvements to the Directorate. So rather than delay the signing off of this plan by further face-to-face consultation, we want to, send it here today and to reflect our continuing change journey and to just, stress really that this is in line with the Directorate's vision. So as I said, the plan was originally drafted and ready for consultation for 1920. However, because of the impact of the pandemic, there's been a delay in us presenting this report for approval. So the financial figures that are contained within the report are based on 1920, and we will seek to update those then as before the report gets published. So as we go forward, it's important for us as a Directorate to build the mechanisms within to our core business really in order that we can monitor this progress, and the report gives some information about how we do that in terms of our remodelling programmes, and we will continue to report on our progress against these. So in terms of the recommendations, I'd like to take you to the recommendations on page 462. We were asking you to note the feedback, approve the delivery plan and delegate authority for the Corporate Director to amend the plan with the financial information. So I'm happy to take questions now.
Thanks very much for that summary of the report. That was very helpful. Councillor White, please.
Thank you, Leader. Jackie, thank you for that. I'm not going to dwell too much on it. As Jackie said, it's the report that's been around for some time now, and that doesn't go without saying all the work that's been encompassed in putting it all together. And as Jackie rightly said, it's our 5-year service delivery plan from 2020 to 2025, which is really the bolt-on to the previous 10-year commissioning strategy we've had across the service as a whole. And I think my message from what Jackie has said there also, Leader, is that, our engagement, our consultation, we've listened and we continue to listen. So I'm happy to move the recommendations proposed, Leader.
Okay, thanks for that, Councillor White. Councillor Patel, please.
Thank you. I'm happy to second the recommendations. I just had a question in relation to the 5-year plan. I know in 3.6 we mentioned COVID, but are you able to give any examples about how you've changed the plan in relation to that?
Yeah, okay, so I'll go and then Laura may want to come in really. So I think our vision within the plan, isn't it, is about promoting independence and well-being to support individuals to meet their full potential. And I suppose our ability to look at examples of the last 6 months around how we've empowered people and change the way that we deliver services in order to meet the challenge that we were facing. It also gave us a significant opportunity in order with us working with individuals and within our communities. So I think in terms of our, our workforce for development, we've had a, significant response in terms of some of the things that we've been doing around there really. I think in terms of our carer support, I think that, I think our carers in Bridgend have had a really difficult couple of months, and I think that what we've been able to do to support carers hasn't been what we would like in some ways, in terms of us being able to offer respite, for instance, in terms of care homes. We've been unable to do that because care homes haven't been admitting and a number of other things really. But I think our ability to identify carers and our response in terms of information to carers to support their well-being has been significant over the last couple of months. And several times today we've heard about the third sector and the work that we've been doing the last 6 months in terms of the community opportunities and what we've been doing. I think is very notable really. We've had it in the annual report. We've had some comments as well as the recovery panel report really. So I think that, in our plan that's presented to you today, in terms of where we look at community opportunities, in terms of our buildings and transport, and our ability to do things will be different to how we thought of it, 6 months ago. But I think our teams are very optimistic about what can be achieved, really. And technology and the way that we've embraced technology, I think, can only go from strength to strength with the way that we're delivering services, really. So I suppose for me, we're constantly reflecting in the service, we're constantly changing, we're constantly looking for opportunities and how we change our practice, which is something that we've been doing, for a number of years, but I suppose we've accelerated that in the last 6 months. So I think that would be my response.
We do it in plans because regional was now apologies gone. Okay, I don't know. Am I less Dalek-y now?
Yeah, we can hear you better now.
Less Dalek.
Leader, suggest you start that again. It was inaudible. Okay.
Right. Okay. So, the role of the partnership board in the planning process. Regional working has never been more important than it is now. To ask how we've aligned our plans with the regional planning framework and how we can involve and work with the regional partnership board to realise this vision, which I think is absolutely the right vision for social services for people. I hope you got it that time, because I'm not repeating that all again.
Okay, I think I heard some of it. So it was about our role, the Regional Partnership Board, about addressing some of the future. Yeah. So
yes, that's it. Sorry, Jackie.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. So in terms of our partnership working, I think that the one thing the pandemic did do is that both operationally on the ground and strategically in terms of planning as a region, I think it grew from strength throughout that process. I mean, it wasn't without its challenges, but there were definitely opportunities. I've recently been in a meeting this week where we've talked about our key priorities across the region. One of those would be about building some infrastructure to support care homes, both clinically and with workforce issues as we go into the winter. There was also some conversations about the hospital discharge and our availability of additional beds and surge capacity across our region. But also there was a recognition that the populations in the region and supporting people with mental health, going back to what you were saying earlier, Leader, in terms of from low-level mental health right the way through to acute services. Again, that was something that we talked about regionally, and whether we could develop something regionally to support the whole, including all of our partners as well. So I think significant work has happened already, and the future looks good regionally for us. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. If you can't hear me now, then and can you? If you can't hear me,
we can hear you.
I can hear you now, loud and clear.
Okay. I may still sound like a Dalek, but not because of the quality of the audio. Okay, so that plan has been moved and seconded. All agreed with that plan?
Yep, happy with that.
Could I just have a quick point, please, Leader? I welcome the plan. There's a lot of very good, clear information in that. It sets out a very clear direction for the service. My question, I suppose, is about how we future-proof it, because, you know, as time goes on, we just need to ensure that it is still relevant. I mean, 6 months ago, we never expected to be facing a COVID pandemic, and it's just how that review process will sort of will happen.
Okay, thanks, Deputy Leader. Jackie, please.
So in terms of us being on top and monitoring our progress against this report and reviewing our progress and adapting it, you know, this plan will evolve as our populations change and their needs change, you know, and we've seen that, haven't we, in the last 6 months. I think our new corporate director has spoken to us about the plan. She's very keen in terms of developing that and ensuring that we've got robust mechanisms within that in order for us to be able to report back to yourselves about our progress against that. Many of the items that are in this report, you know, you've seen some of it in the annual plan, and there are other mechanisms in terms of doing that. We do have quite detailed remodelling boards, one in adults and one in children's. And again, Laura and myself will be talking to our new corporate director to ensure that we've got, you know, mechanisms to cover the whole of the plan really across the whole directorate. So.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Jackie.
Yeah, and as Councillor White and Jackie have both highlighted, the annual report on social services, director's report is made to full council, and that's central to that improvement cycle, isn't it, and assessment of the plan. Okay, thanks. We'll now move on to the Care Inspectorate Wales Local Authority Annual Performance Review, and our Head of Children's Social Care, Laura, is going to take us through that. Laura, please.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Okay, so I'll go straight to it then, item 12. So as outlined in section 1 of the report, the purpose is to share our Care Inspectorate Wales Annual Performance Review letter and seek your endorsement for the same. We normally have a meeting with CIW before this letter is received and published, but unfortunately because of the pandemic, our review meeting with them was cancelled this year. So what we've attached to the report is the letter that we received, and that's at Appendix 1. And in the letter, CIW have provided their feedback on what they saw as our strengths over 2019-20 and the areas for improvement identified for both adults and children's social care. So in relation to the areas for improvement, I can reassure Cabinet that work is underway to address these. From the children's side, our performance in relation to assessment timescales is already showing marked improvement, and we are exceeding our targets. So we were at 74% at the end of March, whereas we're at 96% at the moment, and I'm confident that we'll be continuing our performance at that level. Whilst our looked after children population isn't reducing at the rate we'd been aiming for as part of our reduction strategy, and that's noted in the communication, we are continuing to closely monitor and focus on that. But again, the pandemic and lockdown has had an impact on some of the key initiatives relating to that, like particularly discharging care orders, assessing and applying for special guardianship orders, etc., so that children can cease to be looked after. But we are continually working with colleagues in our legal team and with the judiciary to see how we can reignite some of that work. So I want to reassure you that we don't currently have any children in unregulated placements as well. That's mentioned in the communication. And whilst there are some ongoing issues referenced in our new residential provision with regard to non-compliance, CIW have recognised that we're committed to addressing those and saw signs of improvement at their most recent inspection when they did an unannounced inspection just a couple of weeks ago. So we have attached the action plan for the older adults inspection to the report, and I'll just go over to Jackie now in case she wants to also comment on other areas for improvement on the adult side as well before taking you back to the recommendations, please.
Thanks so much, Laura. Jackie, please.
Okay, so Cabinet will remember that we brought the action plan from Older People Services to Cabinet just before the lockdown, actually, and we were there were quite a number of work streams that were in place. I think a number of them have been delayed due to our response to the pandemic. We've recently met as adult services. We've been through each of those improvement targets, and we have a plan in place for each of those now. So what I'm going to do now is to update this with new amended dates, and then we'll put that into our review process in line with our review of the whole plan. So.
Okay, thanks for that, Jackie. Councillor White, please.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I'm sure Laura will want to make the recommendations fit for purpose now. Yeah.
Yeah, so basically the recommendation is that Cabinet receive the report and endorse the findings of CIW contained in the appendix, please.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you, Jack. Look, Lee, that's all I really got to say in it is that there's always room for improvement. And you know what was identified through the report was work that we were already on top of in many instances. And as Laura highlighted, and as Jackie as well, that we're on top of it and we will get it there. And I don't think I've ever come across any inspection, Leader, where there hasn't been a mention of improvements identified and to move forward. So happy to move the report.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor White. I'm pleased to see that and hear that significant progress has already been made in terms of the action plan. Just in terms of assurance that all those actions are implemented, can I check, Jackie, when the annual report is due to be made to the Council? Because we could consider any outstanding actions then, or that could be reported as part of that annual report. If that annual report is not due for some time, then perhaps we can consider a report back in 3 to 4 months that I am sure would assure us that the actions that are in train have been completed, and then we're satisfied and can satisfy other members that that progress that we've made, that good progress that we've made, is continuing and we've addressed all the actions.
Okay, Leader. Yeah, that's it. So in terms of the annual report, I think one of the things that due to the pandemic, the production of the annual report in a format that you'll be familiar with won't be done in that way, and that was right. Through conversations with CIW. Yes. So I think that's the thing. I think and that annual report would have covered 1920. I think the report on our progress against this and our delivery plan will be, next summer really in terms of that. So I would propose that we come back to you in a few months' time with an update on where we are with everything.
Yeah, so an update in 3 months I think gives sufficient time, doesn't it, for you to make even further progress and for a preparation of that report. Okay?
Yeah, okay, thanks.
So subject to that additional decision, is everyone happy with the recommendation that's been moved by Councillor White?
Yeah.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you, Jackie and Laura. So next report is report on the Cabinet Committee Corporate Parenting in terms of reference and membership review. And again, that's a report from Laura, please, Laura.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'll just give you a synopsis of this report as well. So basically, as outlined again in the opening section 1 of the report, it explains that what we've done here is describe the work that's already underway nationally by Welsh Government to extend corporate parenting roles and responsibilities. And today what I wanted to do was to ask Cabinet to begin to consider the implications of that locally and to approve the commencement of a review of our existing committee, its terms of reference and its membership. Sections 3 and 4 of the report, which I won't go through line by line or in detail, but basically outline for you why change is required across Wales and locally, and how the new charter that Welsh Government will be developing and the statutory guidance will be developed. Unfortunately, the time scale for Welsh Government concluding that work has yet to be confirmed. So that's why we want to kind of drive forward or begin to drive forward this agenda in Bridgend. We discussed it at the last committee meeting in March of this year. And we would like to propose that we start to undertake some preparations locally, and that would begin with a review of our local arrangements. As indicated in the report, I would lead on that as Head of Children's Social Care, and I would anticipate that Councillor White would also be actively involved as chair of the current committee as well. So basically, if I take you back to the recommendation, I would like Cabinet to note the work that's underway across Wales and to approve the establishment of a working group to commence that review of our arrangements within Bridgend, and then we will bring back to Cabinet any proposed changes to our existing terms of reference, which incorporates our current membership and proposals for the future, please.
Thanks for that, Laura. Councillor White, please.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that, Laura. And as I said, we haven't sat back on this because of the recent pandemic. And I think what's important to note from the report and what Laura is saying as well, Leader, you know, it's the extended role of our partners as well in their responsibility as corporate parents throughout the borough. And the membership it will be critical, and Laura is right. You know, it is further than just this authority. And also, I think it's the importance of the young voice, those carers. You know, we need to understand from them. You know, there's a lot of the language that is quite, they see it sometimes as offensive, and I think that we've got to listen to what they say, and I'd be keen to making sure that their membership on the Corporate Parent Committee will be paramount as well. So happy to move.
Okay, is someone happy to second that recommendation?
I would. I'd like to second that recommendation, please, Leader. I'm always keen on having more young people involved in decision making.
Absolutely, and we look forward to receiving that report, and I'm also pleased that the Cabinet member, as the lead member and as the chair of the Corporate Parenting Committee, will be involved in that group as well. Okay, is everyone in agreement with those recommendations?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. So we will now receive a report, and thanks very much, Laura. We'll now receive a report on the learner travel policy, and that is a report of the Corporate Director for Education and Family Support, Lindsay, please.
Thank you, Leader. For the benefit of the meeting recording, I'm Lindsay Harvey. I'm the Corporate Director for Education and Family Support. I'm going to pass the presentation of the paper on to Robin Davis, with your permission, Leader.
Yes, of course, please do. Thank you, Lindsay. Welcome, Robin.
Thank you, Leader. Thanks, everybody. Just for the record, so I'm Robin Davis, Group Manager, Business Strategy and Performance in the Education and Family Support Directorate. The purpose of the report is to update Cabinet on the outcome of the consultation exercise that Cabinet approved back last year on the proposed changes to the local authority's learner travel policy, to assist Cabinet then in determining whether or not to progress any of those proposals. identify how the proposals would contribute to the overall savings of the Council's medium-term financial strategy, and report on the outcome of the independent review. Leader, with your permission, it's a very lengthy report and the appendices are very comprehensive as well. So what I propose to do is summarise the report, and then if there's any questions afterwards that I've not covered off, then I'm more than happy to take questions on that basis. So in terms of the background, there's lots of complexity in respect to the background of the report, as Cabinet will be aware. The local authority has a statutory duty identified in the Learner Travel Wales measure, and in particular it needs to assess the needs of learners. It needs to consider statutory transport for those learners who are part of the within statutory distance of 2 miles for primary and 3 miles for secondary pupils, and we need to assess the availability of walk routes to schools. So the learner travel budget is under significant pressure and has been for many years. It's due to £1.9 million worth of savings made since 2014-15, and there hasn't been a corresponding policy change that has allowed those savings to be brought into effect. Although a policy change was made in 2015 by Cabinet, it wasn't a significant enough policy change to account for the expected savings identified in the MTFS. Costs have actually increased across many facets of school transport. For example, pupils with additional learning needs, disabled pupils, pupils who have complex medical needs. So the costs have increased in certain areas within school transport. We've made significant inroads into the assessment of safe routes to school, and that piece of work has concluded recently. So there's been large investment in an independent assessment of the availability of those routes to school, and that's supported our ability then to look to implement a policy change with a view to make significant savings against the learner travel budget, and to address the nuances in the current learner travel policy, which were introduced by the policy change in 2015. And for example, some pupils who have siblings have eligibility for school transport above those who may not have siblings in the same school, and some older pupils who used to be in receipt of school transport at the former distance of 1.5 miles for primary and 2 miles for secondary before 2015, have retained that eligibility, whereas pupils entering school without siblings, particularly in reception in Year 7, have found that they are not as eligible as some of the older pupils. So those nuances have caused considerable issues around challenges from parents in terms of inconsistencies and inequality. Table 1 on page 639 provides then the full MTFS savings and growth that's been provided into the budget to address the financial pressure. So there are 5 proposals, and those are identified on page 642. And Table 2 also provides details of how those proposals would be impacting on individual pupils and students, because this is not just pupils in primary and secondary school, it's also pupils in FE College as well. So in terms of the consultation, there was a good consultation response. There were just under 1,400 interactions with the public. So it was a full public consultation. And Cabinet can see in the detail provided on pages 649 to 651 the details in respect of those individual responses and the strength from the public in respect of the feelings around that. So that was associated with the public meetings, but also the online and paper surveys that were received by officers over the 12 weeks. On Table 5 on page 654 identifies the first policy element in relation to eligibility and safe walking routes, together with the options available to Cabinet, as well as the risks associated with accepting or not choosing to accept the policy proposals. And it's important to note that in respect of the implementation of this part of the particular policy proposal, that we've actually completed the safe walking route assessments. So as those have been completed in line with legislation, the routes need to be considered as either available or unavailable as per the assessments. So where the independent review of available walking routes has identified a route as available, it follows the legislation and must be considered as such. And where the route is assessed as unavailable, it's followed the legislation and must be considered as such. But it's how those assessments are applied or implemented, and the timescales around that is what is at the discretion of Cabinet in terms of its determination. I'll pick up on the second, or actually it's the fifth proposal, which is around removal of nursery provision, and that's on page 662. And I've been keen to point out the likely disproportionate impact of the proposal on Welsh medium and faith-based education if nursery transport was to be removed, but within the context of the identification that the current big bus nursery transport is considered to be unsafe for nursery pupils. So on page 663, there are a range of options available to Cabinet if it is minded to continue to accept the provision of nursery transport, including keeping the arrangement but making it safer by utilising smaller vehicles because of the issues identified in the report around the utilisation of big buses. Perhaps direct payments to parents as well are included for consideration. In terms of the other policy proposals, just for clarification, it's important to note that in terms of the proposed removal of escorts, which is the second proposal, it's important that this is not misunderstood. This is the local authority saying that we can still make a judgment around the suitability of an escort where, for example, a child has additional learning needs. It was apparent in the consultation there was a misunderstanding that we're proposing to remove escorts even where a child or children being carried on a vehicle had additional learning needs, and that isn't the case. So what we are saying that the smaller vehicles, the driver principally acts as escort, and the escorts that sit on that vehicle act as a secondary escort. So it's less need to provide an escort in those circumstances, but certainly not where children on the transport have additional learning needs, or we've assessed them even without additional learning needs to require an escort. And also then in terms of the proposal to remove under the proposal 3 the specific examples of the special circumstances where the local authority provides discretionary transport. Again, a misunderstanding in the consultation that we were removing something in terms of eligibility for discretion. And what this is actually about, it's actually a good news story, because without examples, it provides greater freedom for the local authority to apply its discretion, whereas the actual examples in the policy were seen to be barriers to us applying our discretion. So some misunderstanding through the consultation. I felt it's important to point out those for you. It is really important that throughout the report as well that we've made references to potential savings associated with each of the policy proposals, and in particular the post-16 proposal, the proposal to remove post-16 for learners in secondary schools and in FE colleges, other than those attending faith-based schools or Welsh medium schools. Because we have a statutory duty to protect Welsh medium education, and although we don't have the same duty in respect of faith-based education, the issues are the same and the context is the same, and that's clarified through the report, that we still have a duty to support faith-based education and provide that freedom of choice for pupils. The remainder of the report then focuses on the outcomes of the strategic review and includes independent recommendations, independent of the recommendations in the Cabinet report as offer recommendations, which are on page 673 and 674. And without going into any further detail, Leader, I'll pass back to you on that basis.
Thanks very much, Robin, and my thanks to you for the work that you've undertaken on this report. I know it's been vast, hasn't it, and over a long period as well, a long period of time, and a huge amount of consultation as well with students, with parents, carers, schools, and the public. Councillor Smith, please.
I won't turn on my vision, Leader, but I've got the conversation band on it, just in case I go Dalek. If somebody could wave and let me know that that's happened. Just in case that happens, I'd better say a few quick things. That was a mammoth report, Robin. A huge, tremendous amount of work has gone into it. It was due to come to Cabinet in July. We decided to postpone that so that the implications of our 16+ sixth form decision could sink in, and we could think about this report bearing that in mind. The recommendations are on page 673 of the reports pack. It's section 9, paragraph 1.10. There are 6 bullet points there. The 6th bullet point is procedural and is therefore accepted, and we've conformed with that 6th bullet point by considering the report fully. Of the other reports, I wish to propose the following. I'll just outline my proposals quickly without any elaboration, just in case my connection fails. But for the benefits of the minute, I'm recommending to my Cabinet colleagues that there are 5 bullet points there. The first bullet point refers to changing our guidelines to Welsh Government statutory distances. I propose that one is deferred, and I'll elaborate on that in a minute. The second bullet point is to do with additional learning needs transport provision. I propose that is not accepted but amended, and I'll say more about the proposed amendment in a minute. The third point, discretionary provision. I'm glad of the clarification from Robin, and I had a clarification from Lindsay earlier on today, and I have to confess I was confused by what I read in the report. So I was minded not to accept, but now I understand that accepting that recommendation will give better flexibility. I'm proposing we accept the third bullet point. The fourth bullet point, 16+ travel. I propose that that's not accepted but amended, and I'll go into more detail in a minute. And the fifth bullet point, nursery transport provision. I'm proposing that again that one is not accepted today but deferred pending further advice. I know it's unusual for officer recommendations not to be fully accepted and proposed and seconded and pushed through, but I think there are special reasons why we can give a rationale for the way that I've outlined. To do with the first bullet point, the statutory distances, we have had some Welsh Government guidance over the summer, and I'll go into that in a little bit more detail. But it's if we were to accept the first bullet point today, that would pile on top of consequences from earlier decisions made in 2015, 2016, and would create even further problems for students. If we decline it today, if we just throw that first bullet point out today, there would still be clashes with the 2015-2016 decision, and we'd be accused of discrimination because we'd end up treating students in similar positions in different ways. So I think the first bullet point has to be deferred. The rationale for what I'm saying is that firstly, the report was developed pre-COVID. I think we feel that students and their families have suffered more than enough disruption during 2020, and I don't think we can, in all conscience, add to those difficulties by disrupting travel to and from school. Many parents already need some convincing that the return to school is beneficial and that the advantages outweigh the possible disadvantages. But that's a background rationale. The main rationale is that during August, Welsh Government announced a review of guidelines and an increase in investment in learner transport. Now, this report was developed in response to previous Welsh Government guidelines in an atmosphere of cutbacks and austerity. So we have to await further detail of the Welsh Government proposals, and I think it would be premature to move now towards Welsh Government goalposts, which might change and where restrictions on free transport might even be relaxed. And it is reasonable to assume that changed guidelines, when they come from the Welsh Government, would be beneficial rather than detrimental when looked at from the angle of the students. So it wouldn't make sense today to make changes that might have to be unpicked in the near future. Thirdly, the UK Prime Minister has announced that austerity is over. Our learner travel proposals were developed in direct response to austerity cuts. I think it would be irresponsible to subject young people to cuts which might turn out to have been unnecessary. The best way forward is to ask the Council to cover this budget cut from other resources across the corporation. Our experience in recent years has been that the outturn accounts reveal underspends rather than overspends. If austerity is truly over, we have every reason to expect this to occur in this instance in this year. And fourthly, our scrutiny committees have argued against all of these cutbacks. We want to respond responsibly and seriously to these concerns. Recommendations and specific concerns from the joint meeting of the two scrutiny and overview committees, which was held on the 6th of July 2020. These concerns can be found on page 664 of today's report, paragraphs 1.113 to 1.136. So the amendments I propose is to ALN travel, that we don't accept the recommendations, but we ask the education section to investigate a system of direct payments to parents, guardians and carers, and this could result in a saving while using our budget to give parents, guardians and carers more flexibility and choice of transport modes. As far as 16+ travel is concerned, I propose that we don't accept the recommendations, but ask education and our transportation officers to continue dialogue, which we recently started with First Cymru. We are seeking to engage with First Cymru and with Bridgend College and other 16+ providers in order to make a saving, but also to create a budget which will provide students with a travel pass. This would be more flexible than traditional home centre transport and would be a more adult solution for these young people, would help to create a new generation of public transport users, and would be a better fit for BCBC's recently adopted strategy for 16+ education and sixth forms. So we also envisage a more conventional transport safety net for a small number of students without reasonable access to public transport routes. And lastly, nursery transport provision. Having read the concerns outlined in the report, we accept that the nursery transport provision can't continue in its current form, and there must be change as soon as possible. Those health and safety issues are serious. So this isn't motivated by a budget cut, but having said that, a solution must be cost effective because this is a non-statutory function. So we ask officers to move urgently to explore suitable mitigation for the risks. It might, for example, involve the use of additional escorts on buses, specifically trained to supervise nursery-age passengers. It could possibly involve the use of booster cushions to make the seat belts more operative. But we ask that the alternatives and predicted costs are brought to Cabinet as soon as possible. So overall, we're hoping that there'll be a saving to be made, not by cutting, but by doing certain things differently. It won't be the budget saving that was originally envisaged, but we hope that the Council can cover this. Thank you, Leader.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Smith, and thank you for your proposed amendments. Do I have a seconder for those proposals, please?
Yes, I'm happy to second that, Leader.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm in favour.
Questions from colleagues or additional comments? I think that's a comprehensive set of proposals that we now have in front of us that have been articulated by Councillor Smith, and they reflect the latest Welsh Government statements and also the position we are in because of the pandemic, and also the response as well that we've had from parents and students and from schools, and the contributions that we've had from our members on our Overview and Scrutiny Committee. So, if everyone is in support of those recommendations, then we will receive a report as soon as one can be prepared on the provision for nursery age pupils, and also on the implementation of the routes, the walk-in routes, and finally the details of how we progress the post-16 transport arrangements as well. If everyone's in support of that, and there are no other speakers, then thank you, Robin. We look forward to receiving those future reports, and we will now move on to the next report from the Education and Family Support Directorate. and that is an update on Bambi, the school modernisation programme, and our plans for Mynydd Cymfig Primary School. I have here that I'm to ask the school programme manager to present this report, but I suspect, as I've seemingly done for half the reports, I've invited the wrong officer to present the report. Or are we indeed joined by, I think that's Gaynor Thomas, isn't it?
But sorry, Leader, it'll be me today.
Consciously unlike Gaynor Thomas, Lindsay. Gaynor needs to go to the doctor, if that is Gaynor. No. I'll welcome the Director of Education and invite you to introduce this report then, please, Lindsay.
Thank you, Leader. So the purpose of this report today is just to appraise Cabinet of the outcome of the education and site evaluation process in respect of the proposed replacement of Mynydd Cymfig Primary School. We also seek approval for the short list of education outcomes to be considered as an outline business case. We are seeking Cabinet approval for the Mynydd Cymfig Primary School Junior site to be taken forward to feasibility stage, and also seeking approval for the proposed 2-form entry plus an additional nursery provision replacement for Mynydd Cymfig Primary School to be considered through the feasibility study process as the preferred education option. So I'll summarise the report, Leader. Paragraph 3 provides further information in respect to the background to this report. And as noted in paragraph 3.10, in November 2019, Mynydd Cymfig Primary School's infant site suffered a catastrophic failure to its heating system, and the repair forced the temporary closure of the school building, which we're aware of. A subsequent builder and condition report reduced the school from its previous condition, that is a C, to a category D, which means the life has expired, is at risk of imminent closure. And this also means it requires significant, immediate and urgent works. So the nature and assortment of the disrepairs highlighted within the survey made isolated repair work to individual elements extremely challenging and economically unfeasible. So as a result, the health and safety risk to pupils and staff, it was agreed that the school building would close and alternative teaching accommodation would be provided as a matter of urgency. Funding, as you know, Leader, was made available through the capital programme to procure temporary accommodation. And on the 30th of June this year, Cabinet approval was received to reprioritise Band B, bringing forward the replacement of the school scheme for Mynydd Cymfig Primary School. Approval was received to submit a revised plan to Welsh Government to reflect this and for officers to commence an options appraisal and feasibility study for the proposed replacement primary school. Further information in respect to the school modernisation programme is considered in respect to this matter, and this is provided at paragraph 4. Paragraph 4.5 outlines a long list of education outcomes considered by the school modernisation programme world, and further to officer consideration, a short list of recommended options is presented at paragraph 4.9 of this report. The 4 options, Leader, are the do nothing option, the do minimum option, where we refurbish the primary school infant block with the school remaining on 2 separate sites. Option 3 is the do intermediate, where we extend Mynydd Cymfig Primary School infant department onto the junior site. Or option 4 is the do maximum, where we replace the school with a new build, including a 75-place nursery provision on the junior school site. So following detailed evaluations, officer recommend the do maximum option, and that is we undertake a feasibility study with a view to building a new school for Mynydd Cymfig Primary School with an attached nursery provision on the junior school site. So Leader, now take you to the financial recommendations at paragraph 8. You'll be aware that in December 2018, Council approved a programme envelope of some £71.3 million covering Band B new school bills of approximately £68 million, along with funding for potential highways works, which is currently budgeted at some £3.4 million across all the Band B schemes. A detailed feasibility study will determine whether the 10.2 capital funding allocation in respect to the scheme is sufficient. So with that, Leader, I'll take you now to the recommendations at paragraph 9 of the report. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Lindsay. I'll invite the Cabinet Member for Education to speak now. Councillor Smith, please.
Thank you, Leader. I won't go on about this. This is good news. I just realised I should have declared a personal but non-prejudicial interest, because I've got nieces and nephews who either are in the system or will be going through Kenfig Hill. I could have got away with it because none of them are Smiths. They are Rowling, as in JK. They are Evanses. That's the Kevin Kribu branch of the Evans clan. And I'm very proud to say that they are also Patels. But they will be benefiting from this investment. Short term with the excellent temporary accommodation on the nursery site, and long term, I hope through option 4, which I wholeheartedly recommend to my Cabinet colleagues.
Thank you for that, Councillor Smith. I'm delighted that this report is before us, and there's a proposal to commit over £10 million to new primary provision in Kenfig Hill on one site as well, because the education has always been of the highest quality at the infants and juniors, but it's been a split site, and that is problematic, isn't it, Lindsay? And to have that seamless transition from the infants to junior phase, we do need to have the provision on one site, and this will achieve that and provide state-of-the-art facilities for the children of Kenfig Hill. I can see that Councillor White is pleased to second a Cabinet colleague. So is everyone in agreement with the recommendations as moved by Councillor Smith?
I'm happy to support option 4.
Yeah, and I may have to declare an interest. There may be some Davids down there as well, but they're not. They're distant Davids, cousins, children of cousins. So I don't regard that as a prejudicial interest, Mondrian officer. If I start going through the family tree for every school that we look at in the borough, then I'd have to declare a lot of interest. Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Lindsay. So we'll now move on to the appointment of local authority governors. Also a report from the Corporate Director for Education and Family Support. Lindsay, please.
Thank you, Leader. So the purpose of this report is to seek approval for Cabinet for the appointment of local authority governors to school governing bodies as listed at paragraph 4.1. You'll note that this is in accordance with the Council's guidance on the appointment of local authority governors. For the 6 schools in the table of paragraph 4, all 8 applicants met the approved criteria for appointment as local authority governors, and there was no competition for any of the vacancies. I need to point out, Leader, again, that subject to the above appointments being approved, it's worth noting there's still 25 vacancies that need to be filled in 20 schools. So therefore, Leader, I take the recommendation of paragraph 9.
Okay, Councillor Smith, please.
Yes, I propose we accept the recommendations and thank everybody who volunteers to be a governor, including Councillor Patel, and just hope that we can publicise those vacancies and get them filled as soon as possible.
Second.
And I know there will be a report, won't there, in the October meeting, Lindsay, and there's already nominations that will be brought to that meeting. There is, how can I describe it, not a backlog, but certainly there's a lot of appointments that need to be made because of the pandemic has obviously created a position where we weren't able to progress them all as quickly as we would have liked. Okay, thank you, Lindsay, and we do have emergency powers that we have exercised before around appointments of governors, but that is only for an emergency, and we can exercise that as and when required. The next report is a report of the monitoring officer, please, on the Cabinet committees for corporate parenting and equalities. So Kelly, please, as our Chief Officer, Legal, HR and Regulatory Services.
Thank you, Leader. As you said, the purpose of this report is to seek approval for the schedule of meetings of Cabinet, Cabinet Committee Corporate Parenting and the Cabinet Committee Equalities between October 2020 and April 2021. Due to the pandemic, we are late in bringing this report to you. The purpose is to propose a Children's and Equalities Champion to chair the Cabinet Committee Corporate Parenting, and also a champion to chair the Cabinet Committee Equalities. You also need to confirm the process for the nomination of champions from each of the Overview and Scrutiny Committees to the Corporate Parenting Committee, and also seek approval of the invitees to attend meetings of the Equalities Committee. If I can take members to paragraph 4.12 of your report, you have set out there the proposed schedule of Cabinet meetings until April 2021. If these are agreed, they will be added to the schedule of meetings which is going before Council at the AGM. At 4.21, you have the dates of the Corporate Parenting Committee meeting. And then at 4.22, is the proposal that the Cabinet Member for Social Services and Early Help is appointed as the champion for young people and children, and therefore would also be the chairperson for the Corporate and Parenting Committee. If we go to 4.31, you have the dates of the Equalities Committee set out for you. And at 4.32, it is proposed that the Cabinet Member, Wellbeing and Future Generations is appointed as the Equalities Champion and also becomes the chairperson of the Equalities Committee. At 4.33, Cabinet has before them the nomination for invitees to go on to that committee. They have been received from group leaders in advance. Members, if you don't have any questions, I would take you to the recommendations then at paragraph 9. Thank you.
Move the recommendation in paragraph 9.
Does any, Councillor Smith, will you second that?
Sorry, yes, I second.
Okay, all agreed?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you, colleagues, and congratulations to Councillor Patel and also to Councillor White and all the members of the committees as reported. Okay, so the next report is also from the Monitoring Officer. Kelly, please. I think you're on mute, Kelly.
Sorry, thank you. Yeah, just a very short report this time, Leader, and that's to inform Cabinet of the information reports that have been published since your last meeting. That report is listed at 4.1. It's the Annual Treasury Management Outturn Report. And the full content of the report is attached to the document for information. I'd ask Cabinet to note that that's been published.
Okay, Deputy Leader.
Yeah, move we note the report, and I believe it'll be going to Council again tomorrow. It just sets
yes,
the
it will be Council again tomorrow.
Report. Yeah.
Yeah. So it can be discussed then, and I know it's something that there's been interest in, so I'm sure it will be discussed. Okay, so all agreed with that?
Yeah.
Thank you. So we'll now take item 20, which is a proposal to exclude the public on grounds of the public interest test, which I will ask the Monitoring Officer to take us through now. Kelly, please.
Thank you, Leader. The reasons why this is on the agenda today is because you've got some minutes to approve. These were minutes that were dealt with, the substantive item was dealt with in private session. So Cabinet have already agreed that the matters under consideration met the test to be dealt with in private session. I would just ask members to apply that test again to deal with the minutes in the same manner.
Okay, members happy to apply that test? The test is the same, yes. Isn't it? In terms of confidentiality.
Yeah.
Yeah, all agreed?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So we will now formally exclude the public. I don't think, Andrew, that we have or mark that we have any members of the public here.
No members here, Leader. I've just checked the participants button, and all councillors and officers